An Italian-style deal will ask the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper.
And former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards is in court today for sentencing over charges involving indecent images of children. It's Monday, the 16th of September. A man's been arrested and an AK-47 assault rifle recovered after an apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Former president says he is safe and well, nothing will slow him down, and he will never surrender.
We'll be live through the course of the day here at the scene in Palm Beach, Florida, as the investigation continues and we learn more about the alleged gunman.
And good morning from Italy, where the Prime Minister is meeting his Italian counterpart with illegal migration set to dominate discussions.
Hugh Edwards is in court for sentencing after admitting he had 41 indecent images of children.
And the Emmy goes to Richard Gadd, Baby Reindeer.
Netflix drama Baby Reindeer wins a blockbuster 4 awards at the Emmys in Los Angeles. Good morning. Donald Trump has survived a second assassination attempt. Secret Service agents spotted a rifle barrel poking out of the bushes at the edge of the former president's Florida golf course. Officials say the gunman was 300 to 500 yards away from the president when they fired on him and he fled. He's since been arrested and is in custody. Our US correspondent Mark Stone joins us now from Mr. Trump's golf course in Florida. Hi, Mark. Good morning to you. What happened?
A very good morning to you, Kay, from Palm Beach in Florida, where a little over 12 hours ago, the former President Donald Trump was playing a Sunday afternoon round of golf. He was on the 7th or 8th hole with the Secret Service detail that he always has with him, around him, when one of them spotted a gunman in the bushes. It is the second time in just a few months that there has been an assassination attempt on the former president. The Trump motorcade heading back to his Mar-a-Lago resort after another apparent assassination attempt. That is how the FBI is describing the events of yesterday afternoon at his golf club in Florida. This is the man the authorities have in custody. His name is Ryan Wesley Routh. He's 58 years old. These 2 bags, a GoPro fixed to the wire, and a rifle were found at the perimeter fence of the Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach, 300 to 500 yards from the former president.
Now, in the bushes where this guy was is an AK-47 style rifle with a scope, 2 backpacks which were hung on the fence that had ceramic tile in them, and a GoPro, which he was going to take pictures of. What they do is they have an agent that jumps 1 hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off.
It's not clear at this stage whether the gunman fired shots or if it was just the Secret Service agents. But Mr. Trump was not harmed and issued a statement shortly afterwards. There were gunshots in my vicinity, he said, but before rumors start spiraling out of control, I want you to hear this first. I am safe and well. Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, make America great again. God bless you, Donald J. Trump. As he was being taken to safety, a car chase was underway on a nearby Florida highway. The gunman on the run, but quickly caught.
We had him contained, forced off the road, taken out at gunpoint, pulled back in what we call a felony stop, and he was safely taken into custody.
This is the Trump International website's virtual view of holes 5, 6 and 7 on the course. And this is where Donald Trump was at the time. His Secret Service detail were a hole ahead of him, and that's when they saw the gunman. From this Google Maps image, you can see the proximity of the public road to the course.
The Secret Service did exactly what they should have done. They provided exactly what the protection should have been, and their agent did a fantastic job.
From the White House, a statement. The president and vice president have been briefed about the security incident at Trump International Golf Course where former President Trump was golfing. They are relieved to know that he is safe. They will be kept regularly updated by their team. And separately from Kamala Harris as the candidate who faces Trump in November, I have been briefed on the reports of gunshots fired near former President Trump and his property in Florida, and I am glad he is safe. Violence has no place in America.
Take a look at what happened.
It was only in July that President Trump survived this. A whisker from a shot in the head at a rally in Pennsylvania. The gunman, in this case, on a roof outside the security perimeter, was shot dead. That investigation continues. And since then, at subsequent outdoor rallies, he is shielded behind bulletproof glass. This image was released late last night by the US Speaker Mike Johnson, taken after the incident, we believe, and in good spirits, it seems, as America absorbs an extraordinary moment once again. How could this happen? Why would it happen? And what next? Extraordinary indeed. Let me just give you a sense of what the scene is like here now, Kay. You could probably just see the sign there, Trump International Golf Club, one of many golf clubs around the world that he owns, and this is where he was yesterday afternoon. You could just about make out the palm trees. They mark the perimeter of this golf club. There is a fence just the other side of those palm trees. You can see the police presence here now. I imagine it will be here for a few days yet, and we think that this southeastern corner of the golf club where we are now is the point somewhere along this perimeter in this southeastern corner is the point at which the gunman was poking his rifle through the fence, pointing it towards Donald Trump. As you said earlier, 300 to 500 yards away from where the former president was playing golf. Let me give you a little update from the former president himself. He has released a more fulsome statement. It says, "I would like to thank everyone for your concern and well wishes. It was certainly an interesting day. Most importantly, I want to thank the US Secret Service, Sheriff Rick Bradshaw and his office of brave and dedicated patriots, and all of law enforcement for an incredible job done today at Trump International in keeping me as the 45th President of the United States and the Republican nominee in the upcoming presidential elections safe. The job was done absolutely outstanding. I am very proud to be an American." That the latest statement, the only other statement we've heard from Donald Trump, who we believe is 10 minutes away from here now at his Mar-a-Lago resort. Vice President Kamala Harris has also released a more fulsome statement. She, of course, facing him in the election just 50 days away now today. She says, "I'm deeply disturbed by the possible assassination attempt of former President Trump. As we gather the facts, I will be clear. I condemn political violence. We all must do our part to ensure that this incident does not lead to more violence." She goes on to say, "I'm thankful that former President Trump is safe. I commend the US Secret Service and law enforcement partners for their vigilance. As President Biden said, our administration will ensure the Secret Service has every resource, capability and protective measure necessary to carry out its critical mission." So those two statements, the latest official statements from President Trump, from Kamala Harris. We are learning more about Mr. Routh, the alleged gunman who is now in custody, potentially will have a court appearance later on today. We're learning more about him. He's been living in Hawaii. He's from the Carolinas, but moved to Hawaii some time ago. And he has a particular interest, according to his social media and indeed media interviews that he has done over the past few years, in Ukraine. He was very vexed about the war in Ukraine, believing that more needed to be done to help defend Ukraine in its fight against Russia. And to that end, he gave an interview with Newsweek Romania back in 2022. And I think we can listen to a bit of that now.
The question as far as why I'm here, to me, a lot of the other conflicts are gray, but this conflict is definitely black and white. This is about good versus evil. This is a storybook, any movie we ever watched, this is definitely evil against good. I mean, we're battling a situation here where, the Ukrainians and the rest of the world are caring and kind and generous and unselfish and take care of one another. And it's just a matter of, we need to stand up for that.
So as I say, he is being questioned now in custody here in Florida. Another extraordinary day for America, and we'll have updates through the course of the day, Kay.
OK, for now, thank you. Breaking news just reaching us. Tito Jackson, Toriano Jackson, an original member of the Jackson 5, has died at the age of 70. He won 3 Grammy Awards during his career, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a member of the Jackson 5. He has passed away, according to his agent, of course, related to Michael Jackson as well. Tito Jackson has died at the age of 70, would have been 71 next month. We'll get more on that and update you further. Meantime, Sir Keir Starmer has said he's interested in an Italian scheme to process asylum seekers in Albania and wants to find out more when he meets with the Italian Prime Minister in Rome this morning. Sneak preview of Darren. He's with us again now in Rome. What's the plan, Darren? Morning.
Yeah, very good morning, Kay. As you say, the Prime Minister's meeting his Italian counterpart a little later on this morning, and there is interest clearly from the UK in what the Italians have managed to do when it comes to illegal migration across the Mediterranean Sea, which is down some 60% over the last year. Now, in part, as always with these things, it's quite complex. We know that Italy has signed deals with Libya and Tunisia, where most of the migrants try to travel from, but also they struck this deal with Albania that effectively could see migrants that arrive processed in Albania before they arrive in this country if they are successful asylum seekers. Now, Keir Starmer has effectively leaned into wanting to learn lessons, if you like, from the Italian system. And clearly this has had added weight, if you like, given the fact that 8 people died over the weekend trying to cross from France into England in the English Channel. Now, there will be some discomfort, I think, at home. Giorgia Meloni, who's the Italian Prime Minister, is from a pretty right-wing government. Many Labour MPs may be slightly concerned about that. But it is also clear, I think, the government feel that they need to do all they can to tackle illegal migration. And on that note, today they've announced Martin Hewitt, a former senior police officer, who's going to take over the new Border Security Command. It won't just be migration, but be in no doubt this is a massive challenge for the government. And this is all part of what Keir Starmer would argue is his plan to try and work with European allies to tackle what he argues is not just a British challenge, but a European one too.
OK, for now, thank you. Speaking to the Home Secretary a little bit later on this hour here on Sky News. Before that, though, the former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards is due to be sentenced today for accessing indecent images of children as young as 7. The veteran broadcaster has admitted 3 charges of making indecent photographs. Sabas Chowdhury has more.
Good evening.
He was one of the most recognisable faces on British television.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Hugh Edwards anchored major national events like general elections and the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. But his career ended in disgrace.
Can you all move back?
The broadcaster is set to be sentenced today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children.
Get back!
3 years ago, and while he was the BBC's 3rd highest paid news presenter, Edwards was involved with a man called Alex Williams. He was sent hundreds of explicit pictures and videos from him over WhatsApp, including ones of children. In March this year, Alex Williams was handed a 12-month suspended sentence. Hugh Edwards, meanwhile, had disappeared from our screens months earlier, accused of paying for indecent images from a 17-year-old. In that unconnected case, police found no evidence of criminal behaviour, but the BBC's handling of the scandal remains under scrutiny.
This has been extremely damaging to the BBC, but not fatal. I don't see how they could have known what exactly Hugh Edwards was up to. What they can be blamed for is not keeping a close enough eye on what appears to have been Hugh Edwards' increasingly strange behaviour over the last 2 years. And this points to a wider problem in the industry.
The corporation continued to pay Hugh Edwards until he officially quit in April this year. This was despite having been made aware that he'd been arrested in November last year, money they've asked the former star to pay back. The BBC said if charges had been brought, they would have sacked their star straight away.
There's nothing more important than public trust in the BBC, and we are custodians of that trust. And what Hugh Edwards did damaged the reputation and the trust for the BBC enormously. So we take that very seriously indeed.
There are still questions on the extent of the damage done to the BBC. But none when it comes to Hugh Edwards. His is a reputation gone, a career blemished. Now, the beginning of accountability.
Sabba's here. His career is well and truly over. Could he find himself behind bars?
Good morning, Kay. Well, Hugh Edwards, as we know, was once one of the most trusted and well-recognisable faces of the BBC's journalism. And today he could well be sentenced for charges relating to indecent images of children. He's returning back to Westminster Magistrates Court from about 10 a.m. Now, he's already pled guilty to 3 different charges. This was after he was sent 41 illegal images by a convicted paedophile, and this was over WhatsApp. We know that 7 of these indecent photos were of the most serious category, and of these photos, the majority pertain to children aged between 13 and 15. We also know that one of those children were aged one was a child, rather, aged between 7 and 9 years old. Now, in the backdrop of this, many are asking questions, saying, you know, why wasn't he sacked earlier? The BBC knew that he was arrested in November, but his employment had continued until April. It was Hugh Edwards himself who had resigned, and this was on medical advice. During this period, he was still getting paid his salary, a vast 6-figure salary, I should say, even after he was arrested. Now, in the meantime, the BBC have asked for Hugh Edwards to pay back the £200,000 worth of public money, and they have said that if he refuses, that they will explore legal avenues.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Meantime, rest of today's top stories for you. Morning.
Good morning, Kay. Thank you so much. I'm going to start with the winter fuel payment because the government is changing the eligibility rules for winter fuel payments from today. So millions of pensioners who had received extra help to stay warm during cold weather will lose out. Let's take a look at the details. People who live in England and Wales can get a winter fuel payment if they were born before September 23rd, 1958. They'll receive the payment automatically if they're in receipt of benefits. But the government estimates that around 780,000 pensioners don't apply for pension credit they're entitled to, which means they'll also lose out on the winter fuel payment. Scotland has its own scheme, but similar rules apply. The US Coast Guard is set to begin a public hearing into the fate of the Titan submersible today. 5 people died after the vessel imploded underwater. This was June last year. Well, the co-founder of the company, which owned the submersible, and its former engineering director are among those due to give evidence over the 2-week hearing. The hearing into Manchester City's 115 charges for allegedly breaching the Premier League's financial rules is set to begin today. The Premier League claims City breached rules requiring the club to provide accurate financial information that gives a true and fair view of the club's financial position. The club, of course, denies all charges. A court case into the future of Rupert Murdoch's media empire starts today. The case will decide who controls Murdoch's family trust after he's gone and which of his children will have major voting rights in his companies. Murdoch wants to change the trust he set up in 1999, which grants each of the 4 equal voting power. And as you've been hearing, Tito Jackson, one of the brothers who made up the pop group the Jackson 5, has died at the age of 70. Tito was the 3rd of 9 Jackson children, which includes global superstars Michael and sister Janet. He was also father to Taj Terrell and TJ Jackson, who found fame as R&B pop trio 3T in the 90s. In a tribute posted online, they've described their father as an incredible man who cared about everyone.
In other news, the US and the UK hasn't yet decided whether to allow Ukraine to fire Western-made missiles into Russian territory. But Vladimir Putin has warned doing so would put NATO countries at war with Russia. Let's talk about that in more detail, should we, with the defence and security analyst Tobias Elwood. It's good to see you, Mr. Elwood. Chat about that in just a second. But first, have you got a reaction to the news overnight that Mr. Trump has survived a second assassination attempt?
Well, good morning. This is another shocking event in a very turbulent presidential election. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Initial reports suggest that this was a pro-Ukrainian activist angry at Donald Trump's lack of support for Ukraine. But America clearly is in a dark place when individuals resort to violence, fire weapons to affect the political agenda in this way. It will raise big questions, I think, about the level of security for all those in public office, not just the two candidates in the presidential race, as we head towards November the 5th.
Let's talk about Ukraine, should we, please? Mr. Elwood, why do you think the decision over allowing Ukraine to fire long-range missiles into Russia is taking so long?
I really don't know. We must not blink. Let's give Ukraine the military kit without caveats so Ukraine can win. The West's entire support for Ukraine from the very start of this war has actually been characterized by hesitance, by strategic decision-making that's just been too slow, and it's caused costly delays as we've fumbled our way to eventually giving Ukraine what it needs, NLAWs, main battle tanks, F-16s, and now this debate about Storm Shadow and attacker missiles. We're too easily spooked by Putin's nuclear rhetoric, but credit where credit's due. It's taken Britain to lead the way, to ignore Putin's threats, to push the envelope and slide across the table the kit that Ukraine needs. But there should be no debate about using ballistic missiles such as Storm Shadows on targets in Russia. If Putin uses air bases, logistical hubs, missile silos inside Russia to prosecute his war in Ukraine, then they are legitimate targets for Ukraine to strike under international law. And this knee-jerk assumption that pushing back against Putin would lead him to disproportionately resort to nuclear war overlooks the huge consequences for him personally and for Russia from both allies and adversaries if he pursued such extreme action. So right now, such a response by Russia is several rungs higher on the escalatory ladder than where we currently stand. And it speaks volumes about how perhaps we've forgotten our statecraft skills and our ability to take calculated risks that were so critical in helping us win the Cold War.
Yeah, but what if he's serious?
Well, this is where, as I say, the statecraft comes in. Perception matters. Russian power largely comes from the perception of Russian power, of projecting authoritarian strength, looking like, indeed behaving like a threatening superpower. That's what Putin does. Our weakness, Western weakness, comes from the perception that we are weak, that we're disunited, that we're risk averse, despite our superior power. So it is this state of geopolitics where we are today. It encourages Putin's adventurism and his rhetoric and discourages the West from standing firm to confront him. We're too fearful of triggering escalation, as you say, that we simply cannot control. But it has what's characterized our entire approach to supporting Ukraine. And we need more confidence in ourselves to take calculated risk.
OK, over the weekend, Boris Johnson, 5 ex-defence secretaries, all calling on the PM to go it alone when it comes to allowing missiles to be used, fired from Ukraine to specific sites in Russia. Can the UK really go it alone?
It can. It needs the approval because of arms export licenses from the United States. But I think that is exactly the compromise that we're likely to see, the use of Storm Shadow without restrictions. But I repeat, the West remains reactive, and we should be on the front foot. We should recognize that this isn't just about Ukraine. This is about Putin at war with the West and indeed with the United Kingdom. And I say, if Britain and America can strike down Iranian drones and missiles heading for Israel, as we did in April, why can't we do the same by protecting Ukrainian civilian infrastructure from Russian ordnance? That's the strong message I would like to see delivered to Putin.
Suggestions that Russia has provided nuclear secrets to Iran in exchange for the ballistic missiles, which we know via the Americans that they have. Do you think the US is taking that threat seriously enough?
I think it is, but we're tempered by the fact that no American president, outgoing American president, wants to hand more problems to the incoming president. That's why perhaps there's a hesitance of President Biden scared of perhaps that escalatory ladder. But if we better understood Putin, and we see this axis developing between China and Iran as well, what his imperial objectives are, to emulate his hero Stalin by Russifying Eastern Europe, maybe we'd more appreciate exactly what he's trying to do, embark on a grey zone war against the West, including the UK. When that penny drops, then we will be, I think, more robust in our stance, realizing that putting this fire out in Ukraine is the easier option rather than allowing Russia to move forward and advance Putin's agenda across Europe.
OK, for now, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Elwood. Let's get more now on the breaking news that Tito Jackson has died at the age of 70. He was the older brother of Michael Jackson and a founding member, of course, of the Jackson 5. Debbie has more for us. Hi, Debbie. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so Tito is obviously the third oldest of the Jacksons. He was born in 1953, so 70 years of age. He was actually one of the founding members of the Jackson Brothers, so that was in 1964, of course, which then, when Michael was added to it, was created into the Jackson 5 and then eventually the Jacksons. He's a father of 3, and of course he's one of the most influential people in music history as well. The Jacksons have been a very, very formative part of the music industry. And his sons actually confirmed his death on social media and said in a statement, "It's with heavy hearts that we announce that our beloved father, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Tito Jackson, is no longer with us. We are shocked, saddened and heartbroken. Our father was an incredible man who cared for everyone and their well-being. Some of you may know him as Tito Jackson from the legendary Jackson 5. Some may know him as Coach Tito, or some may know him as Papa T. Nevertheless, he will be missed tremendously. It'll be forever Tito time for us. And please remember to do what your father always preached, and that is love one another."
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Should universities cap the number of students they take from private schools? That's our debate coming up momentarily. Also ahead, the Prime Minister seeks lessons from Italy on how to tackle illegal immigration after 8 people died in the Channel yesterday. We'll speak to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'll have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here.
They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community. Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake might all be finished, I don't know.
this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life?
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Monday morning. Coming up in just a few moments, we'll speak to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, also talking about schools and what should happen about private schools going to Oxbridge. Is that an uneven balance? Talk about that in just a second. First.
Thank you very much, Kay. I've got the headlines for you this Monday. Donald Trump has thanked security services and well-wishers and says he's safe and well after an assassination attempt. A man has been arrested and an assault rifle recovered. That's according to the FBI. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is in Italy this morning for talks with the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. They're expected to discuss the country's migration deal with Albania, which Mr Starmer has signalled interest in. And Tito Jackson has died at the age of 70. The music legend and rock and roll Hall of Famer was the oldest brother of Michael Jackson and a founding member of the Jackson 5. Former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards will appear in court today and he'll be sentenced. The veteran broadcaster has admitted 3 charges of making indecent photographs.
Now, here's a question for you. Should there be a cap on the number of private school pupils at the UK's top universities like Oxford, Cambridge, St Andrews, the LSE? Joining us now is the head teacher at LVS Ascot, that's Christine Cunniff, and co-founder of Private Education Policy Forum, Jess Stauffenberg. Hello to you both. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this morning. Christine, first of all, your go.
OK, 2 reasons why I don't totally agree with that. The first one is that we're not all Eton, Harrow, Winchester. My school's an all-ability school with children with learning difficulties, and we get children to where they need to be, whether that's a vocational option or university, and about 20% of our population will go to a Russell Group university. The second thing is, if you look at the comprehensive system, take out the faith schools, take out grammar schools, look at comprehensives, look at the top performing 10, the average house price in that area is near on £1 million. And so there's some kind of social selection happening in that comprehensive area. So my argument would be, if you're going to target private schools and normal people like ourselves, what's being done to target those comprehensives where it doesn't seem to be a level playing field for poorer children and social divide is getting wider?
Jess?
Yeah, I think there's some really good points in that. I think one of the issues is that there's loads of different factors that affects a child's education. And there's been a very interesting trial by academics who've decided to re-weight grades slightly. So basically, if you've got a private school student who gets sort of an average of £17,000 spent on them a year, that's what the average fee is in private school. In the state school, you've got under £6,000 spent on you a year, but you might be a child in care, you might be somebody who's been at a school where all of your GCSE teachers had to leave. So what you can do is you can run a kind of system where you slightly re-weight grades so that a private school kid who gets AAA and a state school kid who gets sort of BBB, within the university's own sort of admission system, you just consider the other factors around what happened to that child during their education. So actually a more accurate way of looking at their grades would be more like ABB or AAB. That doesn't go back out to the child, it's not sort of resubmitted to them or anything, but the university takes into account lots of those factors, private school being one of them, because you get so much more money spent on your education, but lots of other factors as well. And then the places are handed back out with that fairer way of looking at what those grades actually mean. And that would be a way of sort of getting in more representative students into Oxbridge.
But Christine, what about those private school kids that have worked their socks off in order to be able to get to a prestigious university.
It should be a level playing field. And just going on to what Jess was saying, I believe that all children should have the opportunity. But we belong to a licensed trade charity, and we have children on full bursaries that are from very, very poor backgrounds and need to be in a boarding school, sometimes away from home. And why should they be disadvantaged? Because we're actually taking care of them. You know, I think it should be a level playing field, and I think that what we need to do is look at those schools that are not those top comprehensives, not the grammar schools, not the faith schools that do really well, but the other schools that don't seem to have a voice.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point. I think one of the problems is it really isn't a level playing field currently. So if you just look at Oxford University, 32% of places last year went to private school kids, but they're only 7% of the country. So we don't have a level playing field. Another thing to show that the admission system isn't really working, just again using Oxford, is only 2.5% of the kids they let in last year were from the North East. That's an entire region of England, whereas 29% were from London and 20% were from the South East, which is very highly dominated by private schools. So unless we think that only 2.5% of children in Newcastle, Middlesbrough, Darlington are capable of getting into Oxford, we currently have an admission system at our top universities obviously doesn't really work.
But that's the rub, isn't it? I mean, if we look at it from a top-down point of view, we're calling them our top universities. Why do we give them such weight?
It's a great question.
I think because it's always been the way, hasn't it?
Well,
and it annoys me because I'm a comprehensive girl, having been expelled from a grammar school. I'm quite proud to say that.
What did you do?
It's not for national TV. And I think the way I look at it is that everybody should be representative. Is it a time that there were more... I mean, there's some fantastic universities that are not classed the top, you know, and I think it's about time that we sang their praises a little bit more and gave them a bit more acclamation for the great work that they do for children all over the country, and more so that we need a little bit more in the north as well. So we bring people, this talent in our country, they're the future, and we need to celebrate that.
I do completely agree with that. I mean, there's one suggestion I've read before that Oxford and Cambridge just become postgraduate colleges rather than undergraduate. And I think actually the whole Russell Group uni group often kind of are able to rest on their laurels of being really excellent. But we know that students are really dissatisfied with the education they're getting.
Does it still have the kudos going to Oxbridge that it used to have?
That's a tricky one. And I think we've got
Depends
to
who you ask, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think we've got to look at employers as well. So, for example, if you wanted to go into, say, the top 4 in London, for example, to study accountancy or whatever, they would probably give preference, or in finance, probably give preference to those universities, but those children. But is that right? Because sometimes it's not sometimes the brightest people aren't the most, how do I say it, common sense.
Clever but not got much intelligence.
But also...
Some might say.
Absolutely.
I'm a bit weighted on this because I didn't go to university, so...
Yeah. And you're also taking on 10 grand of debt a year and it's going to come out of your salary at the other end, so it needs to be a really, really good course. I do still think it holds weight. I've gone into quite an elite profession in journalism and it is packed with people from Oxford and Cambridge. It definitely still holds weight and you don't get enough state school kids going through that system.
Yeah.
You definitely don't. It's not representative.
We need to leave it there, ladies. Fascinating as always. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you this Monday morning, joined by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. That to come.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Our street! Our street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything you know, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
Well, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world.
This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians. You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
we take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here know the truth of ISIS.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Monday morning, waiting to hear from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, of course. Before that, the Lib Dems are meeting in Brighton for their annual conference. Rob is there for us. Hi, Rob, what's the plan today?
Morning, Kay. Yeah, this feels like it's been a sort of truncated version of the general election campaign, if I'm honest. You've had the sort of usual tomfoolery and light-hearted photo ops. One new MP told me yesterday he narrowly missed out going jet skiing with Ed Davey, so he had to settle for the roller coaster on the pier instead. In terms of policy, I think there's a sense of continuity and similar ground being covered to the campaign. MPs being told to focus pretty ruthlessly on three topics the party believes will resonate with voters: the NHS, cost of living and sewage. We'll hear about two of those again today. Daisy Cooper speaking about the NHS, also attacks on those cuts to the winter fuel allowance too. In terms of the longer term aim, what Ed Davey has said and others in the party have said is that they want to be the official opposition come 2029 and point to the dozens of seats where they are fewer than 10,000 votes within the Conservative incumbents' majority. Look, I think come 2029, they are going to have to try and hang on to the seats that they won, I think, on the back of disgruntled Tories lending them their votes. So I think whilst that's sort of doable in one sense, it is still a stretched target. And there could also be potentially a bit of a policy clash between some of the kind of blue wall Tory constituencies they are targeting and some of the long-held Liberal Democrat policies around the EU. They're still a very pro-EU party and want in the long term there to be a path to rejoining, around migration as well. But that's probably why, from senior figures, you don't hear a whole hell of a lot about them talking on those topics. And it is much more about the sort of bread and butter issues that they believe worked well in the election and hope will work well over the next 5 years.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks a lot. Waiting to hear from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Before that, Liz is here to meander through the papers with us. Let's start with our top newspaper, Telegraph, leading with the former President Donald Trump being the subject of a second assassination attempt as the gunman got within 300 yards at his golf course in Florida.
I mean, Kay, it's incredible, isn't it? The Times adds that the presidential candidate declared himself safe and well following the incident.
Yeah, The Guardian reports that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer is under pressure to distance his government from Italy's hard-right immigration policies on the eve of bilateral talks.
And the Mail highlights the reports over expensive clothes being given to Keir Starmer's wife by a Labour donor.
More on that to come. And the Express reports on Labour's axing of winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. The Prime Minister in Italy today.
Yes, the Prime Minister is in Italy. He's just come back from Washington. He's been all over the place since he's come into office. Italy today because he wants to talk to his Italian counterpart, Giorgia Meloni, about the issue of illegal migration. They've had a real success story, if you like, there. She's cut those numbers. She promised that when she came into office. She's cut them by 62% over the past year. So I think Keir Starmer will want to speak to her about how they've managed to do that and if they can and find out if the UK can learn any lessons from Italy.
Interesting to look at what some might describe as a far-right government to see what their policies are.
And you're not the only person to say that, Kay. You're just asking the question, but other people have warned, including Labour backbenchers, but also charities, the Refugee Council, Amnesty International. They have said, do not cosy up to the Italian Prime Minister. There are lots of things that we can do in the UK as a strategy to deal with this issue that are very much along humanitarian lines. They have been saying we don't want to see any more gimmicks brought back in, like the Rwanda scheme, which, as we know, Labour killed off as soon as they got into office. But there are similar, not exactly the same, but similar schemes that Italy have pursued. And one of those is they are processing people in Albania before they get to Italy. So I think there is some uncomfortableness around this visit today from certain sections of the party and the charities.
OK. Let's see what Yvette Cooper has to say about that in just a moment or two. Before that, though, just want to update you on the latest from the United States overnight. Donald Trump surviving a second assassination attempt. He said, "I'd like to thank everyone for your concern and well wishes. It was certainly an interesting day. Most importantly, I want to thank the US Secret Service, Sheriff Rick Bradshaw and his office of brave and dedicated patriots, and all of law enforcement for the incredible job done today at Trump International in keeping me, as the 45th President of the United States and the Republican nominee in the upcoming presidential election, safe. The job done was absolutely outstanding. I am very proud to be an American," in caps. The Democratic presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, has also issued a statement. "I am deeply disturbed by the possible assassination attempt of the former President Trump today. As we gather the facts, I will be clear. I condemn political violence. We all must do our part to ensure that this incident does not lead to more violence. I am thankful that former President Trump is safe. I commend the US Secret Service and law enforcement partners for their vigilance. As President Biden said, our administration will ensure the Secret Service has every resource, capability and protective measure necessary to carry out its critical mission." Well, Newsweek spoke to the suspect Wesley Ruth in 2022.
So the question as far as why I'm here, to me, you know, a lot of the other conflicts are gray, but this conflict is definitely black and white. This is about good versus evil. This is a storybook, you know, any movie we've ever watched, this is definitely evil against good. I mean, we're battling a situation here where, you know, the Ukrainians and the rest of the world are caring and kind and generous and unselfish and take care of one another, and it's just a matter of, you know, we need to stand up for that.
Waiting to hear from Yvette Cooper, who will be joining us very shortly indeed, and she wants to talk about the new man in charge of border force control.
Yes, finally. So we had a promise from this government that we would get a new border security commander. He is an ex-police chief, Martin Hewitt. They've brought him in because they want him to be the person that is behind this kind of smash the gangs strategy that Keir Starmer was talking about all during the general election. They started to put it into place about a week and a half ago. They had a big meeting, the National Crime Agency, bringing together police, security services, border force, and this will be his job. He will be the person that convenes those meetings. He will be the person that focuses all these different agencies on the government's, you know, one of their defining issues, which is going to be illegal migration, and whether they can bring the numbers down.
Let's ask, should we, the Home Secretary about that. Hello to you, Home Secretary. Thanks for joining us this morning. Tell us about Martin Hewitt's new job.
Good morning, Kay. So this is part of our major overhaul and upgrade of law enforcement operations against the criminal smuggler gangs who are undermining our border security and putting lives at risk, with more lives lost again, tragically, this weekend. So Martin Hewitt, who was a former police chief and former army officer, has huge experience around law enforcement. He will lead the new Border Security Command, which is bringing together the Border Force, the National Crime Agency, police forces, intelligence and security agencies, but also, crucially, working with European law enforcement as well in order to go after the criminal gangs and to make sure that they pay the price. They are getting away with this at the moment. It's deeply damaging, and that's why we're going to be strengthening this law enforcement action.
To that end, the Prime Minister is in Rome today for talks with the Italian Prime Minister. What interest should a socialist UK government have in the migrant policies of a hard-right European government?
Well, we've always worked with other democratically elected countries, including those led by political parties that we're not aligned with. The last Labour government did that. Other governments have done that. That's just always been the case. It's part of making sure that we are pursuing Britain's interests, working internationally with other governments. The areas that I think are important in terms of working with Italy are particularly around tackling organised immigration crime, the smuggler and the trafficking gangs. Italy has been doing this. They have made some significant progress on doing this. And also on the partnership working that they've been doing with other countries, working upstream to prevent dangerous journeys in the first place. And there's been a 60% reduction in boat crossings across the Mediterranean to Italy. That means that fewer lives being put at risk in the Mediterranean. It also means addressing some of these border security issues. We do need to work with other countries on this.
OK. Why is Albania potentially acceptable for processing of migrants, but Rwanda isn't? The infrastructure is already set up. We've already spent a fortune on sending people to Rwanda.
So the Italian arrangement with Albania is not yet up and running, and we will be interested to see how that develops. We've always said we would look at what works. It is a very different kind of programme from the Rwanda one. The Rwanda scheme, it was run, the partnership was run for 2.5 years by the Conservatives. They spent £700 million on sending 4 volunteers to Rwanda. That is not a workable programme. The arrangement that Italy has with Albania is a very different one. It's effectively around having a fast track for those who have arrived from predominantly safe countries, and is also a scheme that is monitored by the UNHCR as well to make sure that proper standards are in place. And we will see how it develops. We have always said we will look and see what works in any country. But the other thing that we are also doing is wanting to make sure that we've got fast track arrangements in place. We are developing those to make sure that we can have swifter returns for people to their home countries if they have no right to be in the UK, if they have not fled persecution or conflict, because really the rules need to be respected and enforced. Okay. So we are also increasing returns this summer.
OK, so you are looking at Albania then?
So we'll see what the Italy-Albania arrangement, how that develops. But our priority actually at the moment, what we're looking at, is the development on organised immigration crime, the smuggler and the trafficking gangs. So the work we want to do with Italy specifically is around setting up new Europol task forces, upgrading Europol works. Sorry.
I'm asking you about Albania. Are you considering Albania or not?
It's not in place at the moment, so no. As we've always said, we will look at anything that works. But no, that's not the scheme that we're looking at the moment. What we're looking at the moment is developing new Europol task forces.
At the moment. Let me ask you about the story that's dominating a lot of the papers today, and that is that Prime Minister May have broken parliamentary rules in failing to declare clothes bought for his wife. Why didn't he do it?
So I don't know the details of the donations or the declarations, but my understanding is that the Prime Minister's office sought advice about the donations, and as a result, they sought advice twice, and as a result of some further advice, have made this further declaration now. And it's right, obviously, that they should do so because there are arrangements around making sure that declarations are made.
Yeah, access all areas, passes for glasses, clothes for the missus. It doesn't pass the sniff test, does it?
So I think that the Prime Minister's office have been clear that they thought that the rules had been complied with. They've now made this further declaration as a result of further advice. They'd sought advice a couple of times. I think there have been proper arrangements in place. But look, there's a reason we have these rules, and that MPs do ensure that we follow those and make sure that declarations are made. Sometimes there are errors that are made. Sometimes that does happen for lots of different MPs, in which case they always need to be corrected as swiftly as possible.
Yeah, but my point is this, that Lord Wahid Ali, who gave a significant amount of money to the Prime Minister and also to his wife for glasses, clothes, etc., find himself with an access all areas to number 10 Downing Street. That can't be right.
Well, Lord Ali's a long-standing Labour peer. He's been involved in many different issues and campaigns over very many years. He was one of the leading people involved in the introduction of the equal marriage legislation some years ago. He's been involved in very many different things, and he did a lot of work for the Labour Party in the run-up to the election, and I understand he worked on some of the transition arrangements as well, and he no longer has a pass because that work is now completed. So that has also all been done.
David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, has said that it's OK for Lady Starmer to get her clothes in this way because she doesn't get her outfits funded by the taxpayer. Do you think the taxpayer should pay for Lady Starmer's clothes?
No, of course not. That's not the way that we do things in this country. I think this is a political donation, and I think I don't know the details of the donation, but donations are always declared in the proper way.
Yeah, so the Foreign Secretary misspoke when he said that.
Well, he would think he was talking about arrangements in the US. I don't think there's any difference.
No, he was suggesting that it should be considered for the UK taxpayer to potentially pay for her clothing, as is similarly done in the US.
Well, no, we're a very different country to the US, and I think probably that's, that's something that we all recognise, huge differences between different countries and the arrangements that we have. Yes, I think it's probably a very good thing, I think, sometimes that our politics is very different from the US politics too.
Why is the UK government, who often reminds us it's standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, delaying giving permission for Storm Shadow missiles to be used to target missile sites in Russia?
Well, the UK, as you know, has been a strong supporter of Ukraine from the very beginning, from the first point of the Putin's invasion, and we have stood firmly with Ukraine at every step of the way. We have supplied Ukraine with support, including defence support and equipment, and making sure that we can stand with them. That will continue to be the case. Of course, there are always ongoing operational decisions about different support, different equipment that can be provided for Ukraine. I'm sure all of that will continue. But these are always complex operational decisions and matters that the Defence Secretary, the Prime Minister, will keep under continual discussion with our allies and, of course, with Ukraine itself.
I know your husband is a football supporter. I can't remember if you are or not. What do you think about UEFA warning England that we could be banned from our own Euros in 2028?
So, do you know what? I am not going to pretend to be a football supporter. Ed does get cross with me about this very often. We have Casford Tigers Rugby League. They've not had a great season this year, but it's Rugby League is what I go to see frequently. So I am not going to attempt to keep up with the football debate. Sorry, Kay.
OK. Final thought on what's been reported to be a second assassination attempt on President Trump.
Oh, this is obviously very serious, and it's appalling to see political violence taking place. Violence should have no place in any political campaign. Clearly, I think we're all glad that the former president is safe and that this attempt, whatever it was that happened, was not successful. But it is really disturbing to see these attempts at this serious political violence taking place in any campaign, in any election, and certainly what we've seen happening.
OK, I know you said you're not a football fan, but just all you need to know about the football at the weekend is that Arsenal beat Spurs at Spurs. Made our house very happy. It's good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Make the Prime Minister quite happy too.
Oh, yeah, you make a good point. Thanks very much. Thank you. We'll be talking about that with Liz in just a few moments' time. And also, we've got all today's top stories coming up as well. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. It is Monday morning. The Home Secretary talking to us about the new man in charge of trying to stop migrants crossing the Channel. More on that in just a moment. It's 8 o'clock, coming up on today's programme. The Secret Service stop an assassination attempt on Donald Trump at his Florida golf course.
The Home Secretary has told this programme the government will look at Italy's scheme to process asylum seekers in Albania and consider anything that works.
And former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards is in court today for sentencing over charges involving indecent images of children.
It's Monday, the 16th of September. A man's been arrested and an AK-47 assault rifle recovered after an apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Former president says he is safe and well, nothing will slow him down, and he will never surrender.
A very good morning from Palm Beach in Florida, the scene of that attempted assassination. We will bring you all the very latest on the investigation and details on who the alleged gunman was.
And good morning from Italy, where the Prime Minister is meeting with his Italian counterpart to discuss that issue of migration, which is set to dominate discussions here in Rome.
Shamed BBC presenter Hugh Edwards in court for sentencing after admitting he had 41 indecent images of children.
Don't blame it on the sunshine, don't blame it on the moonlight, don't blame it on the good times, blame it on the boogie. Don't you blame it on the sunshine, don't blame it on the moonlight.
Tito Jackson, big brother of Michael Jackson, has died at the age of 70.
I just can't control my feet. I just can't.
Morning, everyone. Donald Trump has survived a second assassination attempt. Secret Service agents spotted a rifle barrel poking out of the bushes at the edge of the former president's Florida golf course. Officials say the gunman was 300 to 500 yards away from the president when they fired on him and he fled. He's since been arrested and is in custody. Mark standing by for us with more this morning from near Trump's golf course in Florida. Hi, Mark.
Morning, Kay. Right outside the golf course where 13 or so hours ago, former President Trump was having an afternoon's round of golf when his Secret Service detail, a hole ahead of him, spotted something in the bushes. The election is just 50 days away. It is just 2 months since the last assassination attempt on President Trump, and it appears to have happened again. The Trump motorcade heading back to his Mar-a-Lago resort after another apparent assassination attempt. That is how the FBI is describing the events of yesterday afternoon at his golf club in Florida. This is the man the authorities have in custody. His name is Ryan Wesley Routh. He's 58 years old. These two bags, a GoPro fixed to the wire, and a rifle were found at the perimeter fence of the Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach, 300 to 500 yards from the former president.
What they do is they have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off. It's not clear at this stage whether the gunman fired shots or if it was just the Secret Service agents. But Mr. Trump was not harmed and issued a statement shortly afterwards.
There were gunshots in my vicinity, he said, but before rumours start spiralling out of control, I want you to hear this first. I am safe and well. Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, make America great again. God bless you, Donald J. Trump. As he was being taken to safety, a car chase was underway on a nearby Florida highway. The gunman on the run, but quickly caught.
We had him contained, forced off the road, taken out at gunpoint, pulled back in what we call a felony stop, and he was safely taken into custody.
This is the Trump International website's virtual view of holes 5, 6 and 7 on the course, and this is where Donald Trump was at the time. His Secret Service detail were a hole ahead of him, and that's when they saw the gunman. From this Google Maps image, you can see the proximity of the public road to the course.
The Secret Service did exactly what they should have done. They provided exactly what the protection should have been, and their agent did a fantastic job.
56 from the U.S.
This is the suspect in 2022 speaking to Newsweek Romania from Ukraine, where he had travelled to try and join their military.
But this conflict is definitely black and white. This is about good versus evil. This is a
It's clear from his social media that he was vexed about Ukraine and also about the China-Taiwan tensions. His motives now not yet clear. From the White House, a statement. The President and Vice President have been briefed about the security incident at Trump International Golf Course where former President Trump was golfing. They are relieved to know that he is safe. They will be kept regularly updated by their team. And separately from Kamala Harris as the candidate who faces Trump in November, I have been briefed on the reports of gunshots fired near former President Trump and his property in Florida, and I am glad he is safe. Violence has no place in America.
Take a look at what happened.
It was only in July that President Trump survived this. A whisker from a shot in the head at a rally in Pennsylvania. The gunman in this case, on a roof outside the security perimeter, was shot dead. That investigation continues. And since then, at subsequent outdoor rallies, he is shielded behind bulletproof glass. This image was released late last night by the US Speaker Mike Johnson, taken after the incident, we believe, and in good spirits, it seems, as America absorbs an extraordinary moment once again. How could this happen? Why would it happen? And what next? Extraordinary stuff then, Kay, and you can see there is still a relatively sustained police presence here as the investigation outside the golf club itself continues. As for the gunman, the alleged gunman, well, he is in custody not far from here, we believe. There is a chance he will appear in court as soon as today. Donald Trump is safe at his Mar-a-Lago resort, which is a 10-minute drive or so from here. I wouldn't be surprised we will see Donald Trump at some point today. He was due to be in Flint, Michigan for a rally tomorrow before heading to New York on Wednesday, but that will clearly now be the subject of much more scrutiny in terms of the security around those two events, and I imagine that Donald Trump will want to be seen today and be back on the campaign trail. Of course, the questions, Kay, about the investigation, about the alleged gunman, who was he, what were his motives, and then broader questions too, what this extraordinary new moment does for the campaign, how it moves the polls.
OK for now. Mark, thank you. So Keir Starmer has said he's interested in an Italian scheme to process asylum seekers in Albania and wants to find out more when he meets with the Italian Prime Minister in Rome this morning. The Home Secretary has told this programme the government it's not on the table at the moment, but the government will consider anything that works.
So we'll see what the Italy-Albania arrangement, how that develops. But our priority actually at the moment, what we're looking at is the development on organised immigration crime, the smuggler and the trafficking gangs. So the work we want to do with Italy specifically is around setting up new Europol task forces, upgrading Europol works. Sorry.
I'm asking you about Albania. Are you considering Albania or not?
It's not in place at the moment, so no. As we've always said, we will look at anything that works. But no, that's not the scheme that we're looking at the moment. What we're looking at the moment is developing new Europol task forces.
Darren's in Rome. Alice is in Calais for us this morning. Darren, to you first of all. Not looking at it at the moment.
at the moment, but not also taking it off the table. And I have to say, this is a new scheme that actually the Italians haven't properly set up. But why the Prime Minister is here to a degree is because Italy has seen a substantial fall in the number of migrants crossing the Mediterranean Sea in the last year. It's down some 60%. That in part is because they've managed to do bilateral deals with Libya and Tunisia, where many of the migrants who cross the Med come from. But this is part, if you like, of the Prime Minister's attempt to kind of reset, as he sees it, his relationship with Europe, and also part of his attempts to work with what he called European partners to kind of smash the gangs, to try and stop people from getting to Calais in the first place in their attempt to cross the English Channel. Now, many people might feel a little bit uncomfortable about this, particularly in the Labour Party, working with what is a pretty right-wing Prime Minister here in Italy. But as I say, it is such a key political test for Keir Starmer. He feels the need to do this. It'll be interesting to see what comes from those negotiations a little later on this morning here in Rome.
Just to follow up on that, if I may, interesting to hear what the Home Secretary said about the fact that we've already invested £700 million in a similar scheme in Rwanda, but they're writing that off.
Yeah, indeed, and there's a big discussion about this. The Conservative Party, Kay, have launched into this saying, this is why Labour haven't got a plan on all of this. There is, though, a difference between the Albania plan and the Rwanda plan. In essence, people who were seeking asylum in the UK would have been sent to Rwanda, and if they were granted asylum, would have stayed there. The Albania deal with Italy is slightly different in the sense that they'd be processed in Albania, but if they were given asylum, they would be allowed to return or come to Italy. So it is a slightly different scheme, but this is really difficult stuff, and it's politically contentious, hence why Yvette Cooper was being a little bit vague in her answer to you a little earlier.
Yes, she was. Thanks very much, Darren. Thank you. Meantime, Alice in Calais telling us more about the human cost of this story. Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's important to stress it. In the middle of this political football when it comes to migration, there are, of course, humans at the centre of it. And I'm just up the coast from where 8 men sadly lost their lives trying to cross over from northern France to the UK. And it's sadly a story that we are hearing very regularly at the moment. There was very good weather at the weekend, which meant that many migrants tried to make that dangerous journey across. And in fact, on Saturday, 801 migrants successfully made their way to the UK from northern France. But those 8 deaths that happened in the early hours of yesterday morning sadly means that 45 people have died so far this year, which actually means that this is the worst year on record in terms of the number of people who've died trying to make that crossing. Since I've been here over the last 24 hours or so, the weather is certainly changing. The wind is picking up. The gendarmerie, the police, who are very much patrolling the whole of the coastline along here. There's also French rescue vessels that we've seen that have been operating all night. They're going to be hoping that because of the changing conditions, because the wind is picking up, that will deter migrants making the journey across. But of course, we've certainly seen over the last few years that when there are desperate people who are wanting to come to the UK and make a new life for themselves, there are of course smugglers along the way who are very keen to take advantage of the situation.
OK, Alice and Darren, thank you both for now. Thank you. And we're just hearing that Tito Jackson has died at the age of 70. The music legend and rock and roll Hall of Famer was the elder brother of Michael Jackson and a founding member of the Jackson 5. There he is. Debbie's here with more now. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Kay. How's it going? Yeah, as you said, he is one of the founding members of the Jackson 5. He was actually the very, very start of it, the Jackson Brothers, which first started out in 1964 and continued on to the Jacksons when they did rename after a couple of years in 1975. It was confirmed by his 3 sons on social media saying that they were shocked, saddened and heartbroken about it. But the Jackson 5, they of course, are one of the most influential groups that we've seen in the music industry. They had 4 straight #1s with I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save and I'll Be There. He also had his own solo career for a little bit, but ended up coming back to the group and was actually touring only a few days ago, 5 days ago. He was in Munich for their last performance and actually visited one of Michael Jackson's tributes to him and said that he was deeply grateful for a place that honours his memory and a shared legacy as well.
OK, and his 3 sons actually had a group of their own, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they had the 3Js.
Brilliant. For now, thank you. Rest of today's top stories for you now.
Thanks
Freya's
so much.
Here.
Freya.
Leah.
Got Freya on your mind. Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry, Jen.
No, not at all. It was 3T, wasn't it? The group.
3T, yeah.
The boys that formed that. So our heart
1990s, I think.
Yeah, I remember getting the single. Goodness me. Let's move on to those changes that the government are bringing in. It's these eligibility rules for winter fuel payments today. Millions of pensioners who had received extra help to stay warm during the cold weather will lose out. Well, people who live in England and Wales can get a winter fuel payment if they were born before September 23rd, 1958. They'll receive the payment automatically if they're in receipt of benefits. But the government estimates that around 780,000 pensioners don't apply for pension credit they're entitled to, which means they'll also lose out on the winter fuel payment. Well, Scotland has its own scheme with similar rules there. And Typhoon Bibinka has made landfall in Shanghai. The Chinese government had issued a red alert with warnings of gales and heavy rain. Flights and trains, of course, have been cancelled. This is in anticipation of this typhoon. The US Coast Guard is set to begin a public hearing into the fate of the Titan submersible today. 5 people died after the vessel imploded. This was underwater, wasn't it, in June last year. The co-founder of the company, which owned the submersible, and its former engineer director are among those due to give evidence over the next 2 weeks. A court case into the future of Rupert Murdoch's media empire starts in Nevada today. The case will decide who controls Murdoch's family trust after he's gone and which of his children will have major voting rights in his companies. Murdoch wants to change the trust he set up in 1999, which grants each of the 4 equal voting power. It's a huge night at the Emmy Awards for the cast and crew of Netflix hit Baby Reindeer. The show, said to be based on the Scottish comedian Richard Gadd's real-life experiences of stalking and sexual assault, won 4 awards. A comedy series, The Bear, also took home 4 wins, while historical drama Shogun became the first non-English language show to be named Best Drama.
We should point out, though, should we not, that it's It is not a real-life story.
No, well, this is a very important point, because there's lots of legalities going on in legal cases, so it's not based on...
No, maybe based on a true story, but it's not a true story, so if the lawyers are watching...
We didn't do it.
We didn't do it, it's not a true story, it's based on a true story. Thank you very much. Let's tell you more about the former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards. He's due to be sentenced today for accessing indecent images of children as young as 7. The veteran broadcaster has admitted 3 charges of making indecent photographs. Saba has more.
Good evening.
He was one of the most recognisable faces on British television.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Hugh Edwards anchored major national events like general elections and the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. But his career ended in disgrace.
Can you all move back?
The broadcaster is set to be sentenced today after pleading guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children.
Get back!
3 years ago, and while he was the BBC's 3rd highest paid news presenter, Edwards was involved with a man called Alex Williams. He was sent hundreds of explicit pictures and videos from him over WhatsApp, including ones of children. In March this year, Alex Williams was handed a 12-month suspended sentence. Hugh Edwards, meanwhile, had disappeared from our screens months earlier, accused of paying for indecent images from a 17-year-old. In that unconnected case, police found no evidence of criminal behaviour, but the BBC's handling of the scandal remains under scrutiny.
This has been extremely damaging to the BBC, but not fatal. I don't see how they could have known what exactly Hugh Edwards was up to. What they can be blamed for is not keeping a close enough eye on what appears to have been Hugh Edwards' increasingly strange behaviour over the last 2 years. And this points to a wider problem in the industry.
The corporation continued to pay Hugh Edwards until he officially quit in April this year. This was despite having been made aware that he'd been arrested in November last year, money they've asked the former star to pay back. The BBC said if charges had been brought, they would have sacked their star straight away.
There's nothing more important
than public trust in the BBC, and we are custodians of that trust. And what Hugh Edwards did damaged the reputation and the trust for the BBC enormously. So we take that very seriously indeed.
There are still questions on the extent of the damage done to the BBC. But none when it comes to Hugh Edwards. His is a reputation gone, a career blemished. Now, the beginning of accountability.
Certainly his career is over, Saba, but might he find himself in jail?
Potentially, we'll find out after 10 o'clock this morning. He's going to be returning to Westminster Magistrates' Court, where he could potentially face or be sentenced for charges involving images of children. Now, he's pled guilty to 3 different charges after he was sent 41 illegal photos by a convicted paedophile over WhatsApp. Now, 7 of these indecent images were of the most serious kind we know, and of these photos, most of the children were aged between 13 and 15 years old. But one child was aged between 7 to 9. Now, in the backdrop to this, many are saying that the BBC has some serious questions that it needs to answer. Firstly, why wasn't he sacked earlier? The BBC knew that he was arrested in November, but continued to employ him for 5 months until April. And that's when he left on his own terms after receiving medical advice. Now, they continued to pay him his vast 6-figure salary even after he had been arrested. And many are calling on that money to come back, including the BBC, who have said that £200,000 worth of public money should go back to the pot that it originally came from. And they've said that they will explore legal options if Hugh Edwards refuses to comply.
Yeah. To be fair, when somebody is arrested and charged doesn't necessarily mean they're guilty, I suppose, is what the BBC would say in response to that. And as soon as he pleaded guilty, that was when they asked for the money back. About 200 grand?
£200,000.
Let's see what happens with that. For now, thanks very much indeed. Conservative MP for Stockton South, Matt Vickers, is with us now, also Shadow Minister for Crime, Policing and Fire. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time to join us on the programme this morning. First of all, your reaction to the news over the weekend that eight people died in the Channel.
It's horrendous, isn't it? It's abhorrent, actually, that we've got this situation where people smugglers, criminal gangs, are profiting from putting others in peril. Whenever we've seen measures brought forward to toughen up our immigration system, people talk about as if we're evil. It's terrible that you're doing such a thing. Actually, there is no place in a modern, civilised society for an immigration system that allows people to profit from this, allows people to enter the country illegally on the dodgiest of dinghies in what is one of the busiest shipping channels in the world. It has no place in our immigration system, and we've got to stop it.
If the government decides that they are going to put a scheme in place where people are processed in Albania, would the opposition support that?
I find it very unlikely that we are going to see something comprehensive and valuable coming forwards. What we had, there was progress in the last few years. Well, in the last year, we saw enforced returns rise by half. We saw irregular arrivals fall by 26%, and there was a 36% reduction in the asylum backlog. But most importantly, we had a deterrent in place. Everybody tells you we need a deterrent in place. We have to have a reason that stops people getting in those boats. And what the last government did was change the law so that if you arrived here illegally, you would be detained and you would be removed. We had a scheme in place that was going to ship people out. They were going to be removed and processed abroad. And actually, on day one, the Labour Party ditched that. It's a scheme that 19 countries across the EU are now trying to mimic. They want a piece of it. They thought it was going to work. They thought it was valuable. They thought this was the solution to what is a huge international problem. And we've now seen the Germans looking at taking up the facilities that we built in Rwanda to take care of these people when they arrived there. Right. It's scary that he ditched it on day one.
May I ask you this, please? How many people were sent by the British government to Rwanda?
The flights were booked. The resources were in place. That's the reason.
How many went?
That's the reason they were about to start arriving. The scheme was in place. And
it cost us 700 million quid and not one person was sent.
It was money wasted because the Labour Party have ditched the scheme. This is a man, Keir Starmer, has voted...
The High Court said it was illegal.
we've gone through the process. It was legal. We put everything in place to do that. Do you know what? We had lefty lawyers fighting us all the way. We had the courts fighting us all the way. We went through the process, and it is wrong that this country's elected government was not able to get that across the line because of all these obstacles put into place. Keir Starmer does not have the answer. He's ditched the deterrent that the National Crime say is essential. He also voted against every single measure brought forward to toughen up our asylum system. And when it came to foreign criminals, he campaigned against their deportation. This is not a man who's serious.
Let me take you back to my question, if I may, because we're slightly going off the point now. Would you support Albania being used as a halfway house?
As a halfway house. So we haven't seen any details of what Keir Starmer might bring forward. He's only going over for a look. He's going over for a chit-chat, and we know that the king of flip-flop does it all the time. I think we would look at any details that came forward. We'd look at any deal that came forward. But in real terms, what we've seen from his front bench was suggestions that sending people out to Albania was unconscionable. That's what his Home Affairs spokesman said to us. That's what they tweeted out. They said it was wrong. This is a guy who voted against everything we did to change the law and deport people somewhere.
Yeah, events, dear boy, events, as somebody famous once said. As far as Giorgia Meloni is concerned, who, of course, is the Prime Minister of Italy, Rishi Sunak had a reasonably good relationship with her in the past. So you are content that he is discussing plans like Albania with her?
I think, do you know what? I think the government should be engaging with all our partners to see what can be done on this front. I don't hold any confidence out that he's going to come back with anything or agree anything, because everything he's done in the past seemed to be swimming the other way. He didn't seem to have any views or strong feelings like the people in this part of the world about what should be happening on immigration to get back control of our borders.
Should the taxpayer be funding the Prime Minister's wife's frocks?
They certainly shouldn't. Do you know what's infuriating to people in the streets out there is the fact that we've seen this Labour Party take away winter fuel allowance from pensioners on £13,000 a year. And then we've got David Lammy sat there telling us that a millionaire Prime Minister who's on £160,000 a year, we should be having some sort of, worry that his wife can't afford clothes. That is just wrong. And you know what's worse about these donor scandals? What's worse about the scandal of Keir Starmer giving jobs to people who've donated to party, giving them access to number 10, cash, glasses for passes is completely wrong, because it's not people donating because they want to change the world. It's people donating and getting something in return. The last people who had huge influence over, bought me clothes, had huge influence over me. It was my parents, and I listened to them quite a lot. You can't be walking around in clothes that someone else has bought you and not expect them to have influence. And we can't see the Prime Minister of this country selling out on principles because someone down the road is paying for his clothes, paying for his glasses, paying for everything else that he might want to see, do, or otherwise.
Finally, talking about selling out, Labour has sold out their business day tickets at party conference. You're struggling.
I don't think we are. I was in central office the other day talking about our business day, actually, and it seemed to be a huge success.
OK, well, we'll see. We'll be there. It's good to talk to you. Thank you. Punchy?
You or him, both. Yeah, lots of things that came up there, quite interesting. I thought, first of all, going through over the same old ground with the Rwanda scheme. Yeah. There are some parallels with what the government may be considering in terms of what Italy is doing with Albania. It is slightly different, as our correspondent, Darren McCaffrey, who's in Italy, said earlier. With Rwanda, the processing would have then led to people whose asylum applications were accepted staying in Rwanda. The scheme that Italy has agreed with Albania is quite different. If they are processed in Albania, they will then go into Italy. But I did think it was interesting that Yvette Cooper, when you asked her, you pushed her on it and she said, no, we're not considering it yet. We'll see how it works. And
should we have a listen to what she said?
Yeah.
Here we go. David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, has said that it's OK for Lady Starmer to get her clothes in this way because she doesn't get her outfits funded by the taxpayer. Do you think the taxpayer should pay for Lady Starmer's clothes?
No, of course not. That's not the way that we do things in this country. I think this is a political donation, and I think I don't know the details of the donation, but donations are always declared in the proper way.
Yeah, so the Foreign Secretary misspoke when he said that.
Well, he would think he was talking about arrangements in the US. I don't think there's any difference.
No, he was suggesting that it should be considered for the UK taxpayer to potentially pay for her clothing, as is similarly done in the US.
Well, no, we're a very different country to the US, and I think probably that's, you know, that's something that we all recognise, huge differences between different countries and the arrangements that we have. I think it's probably a very good thing, I think, sometimes that our politics is very different from the US politics too.
And just to clarify, they don't actually pay for for First Lady's clothes in the US. It was just that our Foreign Secretary had suggested that they did, and that's what he wanted to see here, all over the place.
All over the place. I'm not surprised that David Lammy made that mistake because, of course, the difference between here and the US, which is probably what he was alluding to, was it's a much more formal role in the US. And I think it's a bit... one of the problems here is that the wife or husband of the Prime Minister, it's a very kind of vague role. They keep their job, they keep their life, but, of course, they are in the glare of the public scrutiny. They are in... everything that they do and all the clothes that they wear are picked apart, criticised. And so, you know, you can understand why there is pressure on currently the wife of the Prime Minister to look her best. But I think, you know, you saw there, Yvette Cooper, this could be a bit of a problem for this government, for the Prime Minister, who put himself on a pedestal, made himself into Mr. Rules, said that he was going to stand on a ticket of integrity. And when you have these issues coming up, I think it really starts to chip away at that.
OK. For now, thanks so much indeed. Talking about that in more detail with Jack and Sam in just a few moments' time. And why UEFA's threatening to block England from competing at Euro 2028, which is being held partly in the UK.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'm going to have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here.
They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic.
We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community.
Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake might all be finished, I don't know.
This conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we're going to be catching up with Jack and Sam. Jack's here, Sam's in Brighton, discussing the podcast from this morning. But first, our top stories.
Thank you so much, Kay. We'll start in the US. Donald Trump has thanked security services, adding he is safe and well after that assassination attempt. A man has been arrested and an assault rifle recovered. That's according to the FBI. President Biden has said there is no place in the US for political violence and says he has directed the Secret Service to have every resource to protect the former president. Back here, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in Italy this morning for talks with the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. The Home Secretary told this programme the government will look at Italy's plans to process asylum seekers in Albania. And while the scheme is not on the table at the moment, they will consider anything that works. And Tito Jackson has died at the age of 70. The music legend and rock and roll Hall of Famer was the older brother of Michael Jackson and a founding member of the Jackson 5.
More now on the big political stories of the day. Jack and Sam are with us, fresh from recording their podcast. Before we do that, though, who did you see at the weekend?
Well, I did not go to Brighton like Sam, who spent the weekend with the Lib Dems. I stayed with my family in London, and I was at a fun fair, and you know those shooting ranges where you have to shoot things and you smash things and then you win a prize? And there was someone in front of me who was really good at it. He had a baseball cap on. He was smashing them all. I was like, that guy's good. He turned around, it's Jason Statham. It's actual Jason Statham popping shots at the fun fair and walked off with a nice cuddly toy for his kids.
Did
like,
he?
wow, I'm not following that.
Yeah,
Ran a million miles.
Yeah, I want to go on the waltz.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on where you are this morning, Sam?
I'm in Brighton. It is the Liberal Democrat Party conference. A victory rally if ever I saw one. The sun is shining and that reflects the mood inside this party. They've got 72 MPs. So apart from anything else, this is a get-to-know-you gathering. Actually, the party staff have to have sheets of paper with photographs of the various MPs on them because nobody really knows who each other is here. That's a reflection of just how well the Liberal Democrats did. 12% of the vote, but 72 MPs. The question is, what's Ed Davey going to do with all that power?
That's a great question. And as far as Keir Starmer is concerned, can he smash the gowns?
Well, I mean, I doubt it, honestly, but, you know, he's been promising that in opposition. He's now promising it in government. He's been touring the world, really, hasn't he, since he came into power? Not unreasonably. Needs to get to know all the different foreign leaders. We saw him in the White House on Friday with Joe Biden, and today he's in Rome with the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. And Italy, you know, is worked very, very hard to try and tackle illegal migration, and certainly plenty of people in the UK government see some similarities between the problems Italy's faced, problems we're seeing in the Channel. And so much like Rishi Sunak did before him, Keir Starmer is going over to Italy to try and talk to Meloni about how they're approaching it and see if there's anything Britain can learn.
Yeah, Sam, what does that say about the optics of a socialist government talking to what some would consider a far-right government?
Well, there are some members of the Labour Party who are deeply uncomfortable with what Keir Starmer is doing, some of them out in the traps in the papers this morning. But I think the bottom line is, Kay, that Keir Starmer needs to do something about the sheer numbers of boats crossing the Channel. Yet more tragedy over the weekend. We see some records starting to be broken under this government, and the Conservatives turning up the heat on this issue. There are bits and pieces of what Italy's doing that I think the British government is interested in copying, not least because the number of people trying to cross the Mediterranean to get to Italy has dropped 60%, we are told. There are a couple of schemes that they're looking at. You heard about them from Liz Bates a few moments ago, giving money to countries like Tunisia to try and reinforce their border security is one. But then there is this Albania scheme where you can send effectively asylum seekers from safe countries to Albania, and they will be processed by Italian border guards there, and if they fail
that processing or denied that application, then they get sent back to their home country. Otherwise, they can go back to Italy. Now, the scheme isn't up and running, even though it's meant to. Some teething problems there. The buildings aren't ready. But I think whether or not that's a precedent that Britain wants to follow, Keir Starmer would argue it is very different from the Rwanda scheme, which was one of the first things that he scrapped. It is legal under international law, but still, just the optics of shipping migrants who've already made long journeys in difficult conditions around the globe to other places, I think tricky for some in the Labour Party.
Yeah, and let's have a quick listen to you discussing that at Politics at Jack and Sam's this morning.
The big thing I think that Labour is definitely interested in is this deal, which is it's essentially the I can't believe it's not Rwanda deal that Italy have struck with Albania, and expect politicians to be telling you, Labour politicians to be telling you long and hard all the way through today why Italy's Albania deal that Keir Starmer has confirmed that he's looking at and the previous government's Rwanda deal are totally different and separate things.
It's a really interesting situation, this, because when Maloney was elected, a couple of years ago now, she was very much painted as a far-right leader. But the idea of a sort of centre-left British Prime Minister going over to meet someone like that and, quote-unquote, learn from them on immigration is just quite an extraordinary thing that you maybe would not have imagined happening when she was elected a couple of years ago.
What does your poster say on the wall?
El tercer hombre.
OK.
It's the third man in Spanish. You ever seen The Third Man?
I have,
Yeah,
but
brilliant.
not in Spanish.
Not in Spanish. Never mind. Well, next time.
OK. What else have you got in the podcast today? I should say you can scan the QR code and follow. Go on.
You can, yeah. So we're talking about Starmer's trip. We're talking about the Lib Dems. We sort of tee up the whole week ahead. There's various other big moments coming up this week, not least Reform UK has its conference at the end of the week. Nigel Farage will be taking the stage and trying to rally his troops. As Sam mentions on the podcast, Nigel Farage actually got a bigger proportion of the votes in the election than the Lib Dems did, but only a fraction of the number of MPs. So they do not have the big clout and power that the Lib Dems hold in Parliament, but they're obviously an important voice in terms of trying to put pressure on the Tories in particular to push them towards the right.
Where are they having their conference? In that cafe that's on...
Very harsh. Yeah. Somewhere very nice in Birmingham, I believe.
Fantastic. And Sam, with interest rates, as you were saying, are out this week, and also inflation stats.
That's right, both seem to be coming down. There's a lot of hope, I think, in government that the Bank of England might deliver yet another interest rate cut. Some of the various measures of inflation have been going in the right direction, so that could sort of pave the way. That will make a slice of the population feel better off, which is exactly what the government wants and hopes to achieve. The danger about this, watching this month to month, though, is that we could get moments where you saw the energy price cap rise, so inflation might be less favourable in a month or two, and then interest rates are sort of parked at maybe a slightly lower rate for a while. This government can't be seen too much to hitch success to that interest rate level. And as Jack says on the podcast, if things get markedly better too soon, then it just makes it more difficult for the government to make the doom and gloom argument that the inheritance was terrible, they have to do drastic things, raise our taxes, cut welfare spending on October the 30th in the budget.
OK, posh frocks and funky glasses.
Posh frocks and funky glasses. Now, what could you possibly be referring to, Kay?
Unbelievable. I mean, as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, he didn't declare everything that he should have done, as far as his wife's frocks are concerned. He got tens of thousands of pounds worth of new glasses and goodness knows what else. He's a millionaire, he's a multi-millionaire. What does that say about the optics of the situation when they're asking people to tighten their belts?
Well, it's certainly an awkward story for Keir Starmer. It was broken in the Sunday Times, I think, yesterday, and an awkward story for Labour more generally, because, as Sam says, the whole framing that this government is doing is about, you know, we all have to tighten our belts. This is a difficult time. We've inherited a mess. Everything this autumn is centred around this budget on October the 30th, only, 6 weeks away, when we've been told by the Prime Minister it's going to be painful. That means people's taxes are going up, people's welfare payments are going to go down. And so this kind of story is just exactly what you don't want. And I think when Keir Starmer gives his press conference in Italy this afternoon, he'll be standing next to Giorgia Meloni. He'll be keen to talk about migration and getting tough on illegal migration. I suspect he'll have to find himself having to answer questions about this instead, which is the last thing he wants.
And a final thought from you, Sam?
Not only is it a question of whether he broke the rules, but Keir Starmer takes a lot of freebies. That hasn't gone unnoticed. I think David Lammy poured fuel on the fire yesterday when talking to Trevor Phillips, saying, look, maybe there should be taxpayer money used to fund the outfits of spouses. I don't think that will have gone down terribly well, not least with other bits of the Labour Party. It's messy. Why does the Prime Minister, who is on over 150 grand, needing to take freebies from donors? It's not a great look. And it leaves even people in his inner circle scratching their heads.
Yeah, even his footy tickets as well. He's been pulled up for that in the past, hasn't he?
I mean, it's all of that has been declared, and it's all on a public register you can see. And
Yeah,
he
but
would
it's
say
the optics, though.
he would say they're very important meetings with very important people and so on. But you're right, it builds up into a picture, and you just don't really want people talking about this kind of thing when you've just come into power. You've been in power, what, 2 or 3 months? There should be a sort of honeymoon period for Keir Starmer, and instead his poll ratings are already through the floor, and here we are talking about, what is it, dresses and funky glasses?
Yeah, posh frocks.
Posh frocks,
and funky glasses. If you want to watch or listen to the podcast, you can scan to follow with that QR code, and there's another episode tomorrow.
There's another episode tomorrow, and another one on Wednesday, another one on Thursday, and it's all done in 20 minutes, so you can listen to it in the shower, on the way into work, whatever you do in the morning, and you're ready for the day.
Fantastic.
That's the idea.
Yeah, that's a good promo. I liked that.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. UEFA threatens to block England from competing at Euro 2028 over plans for an independent football regulator. Guess where that tournament's being held?
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Wall Street! Wall Street!
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything, his memories is all gone.
In almost every corner, this town has been completely destroyed by the fire. I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
I get that that's where the media likes to go.
Well, it's not. It's where many of the people we've talked to here like to go.
I report on the biggest stories from around the world. This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians. You say it's all fabrication, what's happening in Bucha?
Destroyed my nation.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet. Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem. A very violent series of confrontations here. What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here knows the truth of ISIS.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Hello again, everybody. UEFA is warning England could be barred from competing at Euro 2028 if plans for an independent football regulator go ahead. Joining us now is the Vice Chair of the Football Supporters Association. That's Tom Greatex. Hi, Tom, good to see you. What do you make of this?
What do I think of it? I think that if you read the letter is very reasonable on making the point that if government were to interfere in running football competitions, there would be an issue. But that isn't what's being proposed. Firstly, it's not government, it's independent of government. Secondly, it's about financial regulation, supporter engagement, and ensuring that things like the European Super League breakaway wouldn't be allowed to happen. That's not government interference in running the competition. So anyone who suggests, as I think one newspaper did yesterday, that this is somehow a threat to England participating in the European Championships in the future or UEFA competitions is guilty of either wishful thinking or willful ignorance or a combination of the two.
You're saying there's no likelihood whatsoever of that happening?
Absolutely not. I mean, look, this is a bill which was going through Parliament when the election was called, and the incoming government has said they will reintroduce a bill along very similar lines. And all of these issues went through discussion in the committee stage of the legislation before the election was called. So there isn't an issue. There would be an issue if this was about government running football, but it's not. It's about independent regulation, independent of the clubs and leagues, but also independent of government. And it's about financial well-being, it's about supporter engagement, and it's about preventing breakaway Super Leagues and the equivalent happening.
So why has UEFA got involved?
Well, look, UEFA have written to Lisa Nandy as the new Secretary of State, outlining their position, which is the same as their position was before the election, which is that they welcome there being better supporter engagement. They welcome a licensing regime, which is what the independent regulator will do and happens in many other European and UEFA nations already. They express the hope that in time that might transfer to the FA as opposed to an independent regulator, which may well happen at some point in the future. But they're not saying that the independent regulator, as per the bill that was taken through Parliament and then stopped because of the election, is in any way a threat to Europe, to England playing in Europe or hosting European championships or English clubs in European competition. And interpreting in that way is frankly just part of a campaign to discredit the idea. And I think, look, the people who are doing that and trying to do it, who are desperate to avoid a regulator, have some vested interests in football. And I think, frankly, they underestimate the strength of the argument and they underestimate the credibility of the incoming and new Secretary of State in seeing off these arguments.
But am I not right in saying that the Premier League itself actually had an advertising campaign highlighting the challenges, the risks of introducing an independent regulator?
Yeah, look, the Premier League have been opposed to any independent regulation or oversight of the mess they have made of regulating top-flight football since it was suggested by Tracy Crouch's review. The English Football League, which has 72 professional clubs in it, including clubs in smaller clubs and larger clubs, some of the biggest names in football like Leeds and some smaller clubs as well, are supportive of it. So look, there are different leagues take different views on it. But the reality is the Premier League have been opposed since the start. They've been engaged in a campaign to try to discredit it, to misrepresent it. And I think, frankly, this seems to be a last desperate throw of that dice rather than anything substantial or significant or anything any football fan in England should be worried about.
OK, good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed. Thank you. Chatting to Rob about that in just a second or two. Before that, though, just want to take you to Westminster Magistrates Court, where journalists and those members of the public alike are waiting outside, here we go, to see Hugh Edwards. Hugh Edwards, who is the shamed BBC presenter, news presenter. He will be arriving at court momentarily after pleading guilty at an earlier hearing of several charges of images relating to children. Some of those children very young, or one child in particular, very young indeed. He did appear in a similar position at his previous hearing, wearing his sunglasses, walking through the crowds. That was then postponed, adjourned until today. We're expecting to see Hugh Edwards, who was sacked by the BBC. They're now asking for £200,000 of his salary to be returned. We'll cover that for you as soon as it happens here on Sky. Rob is here. Lots to talk about, isn't there? Not least, should we just deal with that first of all? Is there any chance whatsoever that England might not be able to take part in a tournament that they're hosting?
I think it's highly unlikely. To some, this is scaremongering. It's very helpful for the Premier League, this, because some of the language from UEFA does reflect some of the concerns they've been warning about. UEFA say there could be scope creep for the Premier League, that's unintended consequences. In fact, once you've introduced a regulator, it assumes too many powers and things never envisaged. The thing causing concern, which maybe could be removed, is the fact the regulator bill talks about how trade and foreign policy has to be taken into consideration on football matters. But if you look at the UEFA regulations that would govern things like suspending a federation like the FA, it says that that would only be an issue if there was significant interference in the affairs of the FA, and this would not point to that at this stage, how the bill is progressing.
And what's going on with City?
Well, this is the most consequential case, perhaps, in the history of English football. The case begins today, the Premier League versus its most successful team over the last decade.
Steady on. I'm not sure about that.
Over the last decade.
OK, fine.
Yeah. they haven't had an invincible season.
So tell
But, yes, it all relates to how they've accumulated the wealth to fund the squad. And City were accused by the Premier League of inflating sponsorship income, misleading financial information being provided relating to the income coming into the club, as well as how they've paid managers. Also, over the alleged failure to cooperate with the investigation over many years, because this has been dragging on for 6 years since allegations first emerged in the German outlet Der Spiegel, which gained internal correspondence from Manchester City, just about how it managed to comply with financial fair play regulations. Effectively, did it either inflate the income or disguise the source of income linked to its Abu Dhabi ownership? Their owner is Sheikh Mansour, who is the vice president of the UAE. He insists it is a private investment according to City rather than being state-owned. But there are many state-linked sponsored from the UAE. And the question is, did City attempt to comply with the financial rules to fund all the success in its squad by inflating this income unfairly?
Is it a legal hearing?
No, it's a Premier League hearing. We don't know where it is. We don't know exactly how long it will take place, but it could be 2 months, and it is being held in private. So what could happen at the end of it? Could City be deducted points? We've seen other clubs for financial rule breaches. Could they be relegated from the Premier League? It is very significant, this, for the Premier League, and City will throw their full legal weight behind it. They're also mounting another case against the Premier League, alleging discrimination linked to how sponsorships are assessed in terms of the funding. So this is a huge battle that is taking place, and this is the team that's won the last 4 Premier League titles.
Are there other clubs that potentially might face a similar fate?
Well, other clubs have breached the profit and sustainability rules in recent times, like Everton, but we have had Manchester City previously face a UEFA sanction. Now, banned from the Champions League initially in 2020, but they overturned that ban. They managed to get their lawyers to find all the details that managed to exonerate them in terms of the ban, but they were still fined €10 million, a huge amount by UEFA, for being accused of obstructing that investigation.
OK, for now. Thanks, Rob. Thank you. Just a reminder that the former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards is due to be sentenced in court today for accessing indecent images of children as young as 7. We're going to be hearing from Martin Brunt in just a few moments' time. These are live images from outside Westminster Magistrates' Court. The shamed presenter, this is his second appearance. Previously, he had pleaded guilty to those charges. In theory, he could face a custodial sentence today, or that could be adjourned to a higher court. Obviously, there is significant interest in Hugh Edwards arriving at the court this morning. We will cover that for you as soon as he arrives. You're watching Sky News Breakfast Monday morning.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, the Secret Service stop an assassination attempt on Donald Trump at his Florida golf course.
The Home Secretary has told this programme that the government will look at Italy's scheme to process asylum seekers in Albania and consider anything that works.
And former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards is in court in the next few minutes, really, over sentencing over charges involving indecent images of children.
It's Monday, the 16th of September. A man has been arrested and an AK-47 assault rifle recovered after an apparent assassination attempt on Donald Trump. The former president says he is safe and well, nothing will slow him down, and he will never surrender.
A very good morning from Palm Beach in Florida, the scene of that attempted assassination. We will bring you all the very latest on the investigation and details on who the alleged gunman was.
I'm outside the court where in the next couple of hours the former BBC news presenter Hugh Edwards is expected to be sentenced over making indecent child images.
And good morning from Italy, where the Prime Minister is meeting his Italian counterpart with illegal migration dominating discussions.
You have to do my little videos.
Don't blame it on the sunshine. Don't blame it on the moonlight. Don't blame it on the good times. Blame it on a boogie. Don't you blame it on the sunshine.
And Jackson 5 star Tito Jackson has died at the age of 70. Morning, everybody. Donald Trump has survived a second assassination attempt. Secret Service agents spotted a rifle barrel poking out of the bushes at the edge of the former president's Florida golf course. Officials say the gunman was 300 to 500 yards away from the president when they fired on him and he fled. He has since been arrested and is in custody. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has this report.
The Trump motorcade heading back to his Mar-a-Lago resort after another apparent assassination attempt. That is how the FBI is describing the events of yesterday afternoon at his golf club in Florida. This is the man the authorities have in custody. His name is Ryan Wesley Routh. He's 58 years old. These two bags, a GoPro fixed to the wire and a rifle, were found at the perimeter fence of the Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach, 300 to 500 yards from the former president.
What they do is they have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual, at which time the individual took off.
It's not clear at this stage whether the gunman fired shots or if it was just the Secret Service agents. But Mr. Trump was not harmed and issued a statement shortly afterwards. There were gunshots in my vicinity, he said, but before rumours start spiralling out of control, I want you to hear this first. I am safe and well. Nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. I will always love you for supporting me. Unity, peace, make America great again. God bless you, Donald J. Trump. As he was being taken to safety, a car chase was underway on a nearby Florida highway, the gunman on the run, but quickly caught.
We had him contained, forced off the road, taken out at gunpoint, pulled back in what we call a felony stop, and he was safely taken into custody.
This is the Trump International website's virtual view of holes 5, 6 and 7 on the course, and this is where Donald Trump was at the time. His Secret Service detail were a hole ahead of him, and that's when they saw the gunman. From this Google Maps image, you can see the proximity of the public road to the course.
The Secret Service did exactly what they should have done. They provided exactly what the protection should have been, and their agent did a fantastic job.
56 from the U.S.
This is the suspect in 2022, speaking to Newsweek Romania from Ukraine, where he had traveled to try and join their military.
But this conflict is definitely black and white. This is about good versus evil.
It's clear from his social media that he was vexed about Ukraine and also about the China-Taiwan tensions. His motives now not yet clear. From the White House, a statement. The president and vice president have been briefed about the security incident at the Trump International Golf Course where former President Trump was golfing. They are relieved to know that he is safe. They will be kept regularly updated by their team. And separately, from Kamala Harris as the candidate who faces Trump in November, I am deeply disturbed by the possible assassination attempt of former President Trump today. As we gather the facts, I will be clear. I condemn political violence. We must all do our part to ensure that this incident does not lead to more violence. I am thankful that former President Trump is safe.
Take a look at what happened.
It was only in July that President Trump survived this. A whisker from a shot in the head at a rally in Pennsylvania. The gunman, in this case, on a roof outside the security perimeter, was shot dead. That investigation continues. And since then, at subsequent outdoor rallies, he is shielded behind bulletproof glass.
Well, this is the public road at the southeast corner of the golf club, and you can see beyond the trees there the hedge, and within that is a fence, and this is the area where the gunman was. There is still a police presence here. It's likely to be here for some time as the investigation continues. And then, of course, there are the broader questions: how to keep the two candidates safe with the election just 50 days away, and also the question of how this moment changes the race, shifts the polls.
This image was released late last night by the US Speaker Mike Johnson, taken after the incident, we believe, and in good spirits, it seems, as America absorbs an extraordinary moment once again. How could this happen? Why would it happen? And what next? Mark Stone, Sky News in Palm Beach, Florida.
OK, here we go. Hugh Edwards, sunglasses off, arriving at Westminster Magistrates Court for sentencing. Martin is there for us. Martin?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear the question, Kay, but yes, that was him arriving with what looked like several lawyers. Whether any of those people with him were supporters of his, we'll know when the hearing gets going in about an hour's time. But we're expecting him to be sentenced today. That's not certain. The magistrates here, or the district judge, as we call them now, could decide that the sentencing powers of this court aren't enough. There's a limit of 6 months imprisonment, and could move it to the higher court. But I think all the indications from the last hearing here in July, particularly from the prosecutor, those indications are that if there is to be a jail sentence on Hugh Edwards, it's most likely to be suspended. In fact, the man, Alex Williams, who was convicted of sending those images to Hugh Edwards, he was given a suspended jail sentence. So if the district judge here takes any account of that, I think it is likely that Hugh Edwards will avoid going to prison.
Talk to me about his demeanour, if you would, please. Martin, I know we saw him last time. He seemed much more confident. He was wearing his sunglasses. He strolled through those that wanted to speak to him. He seemed a little bit more on edge today, perhaps?
Well, he went in very quickly. I mean, I only saw him for about 3 seconds. I think he caught us all a bit by surprise. But there was absolutely a contrast between his appearance today in the last few minutes and his arrival at court last time. I mean, how weird was that approach to the court in July? He walked very slowly with his police escort, with sunglasses, his head held high. It was almost sort of an imperious approach, and very difficult to judge what was going through his mind, whether it looked arrogant, but perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps it was shame and a sense of his disgrace. I mean, you can't overestimate the fall from grace that the BBC's top news presenter has experienced in the past, over a year now since stories started emerging. He seemed to be pulling a bag with him, whether he's brought his toothbrush, because there is the possibility of a custodial sentence. But as I said earlier, I think it's probably quite remote, because the prosecutor, Ian Hope, on the last appearance, said that a suspended sentence might be considered. But of course, it's all up in the air. It's in the hands of the district judge, who will start hearing this case, or the end of this case, from about 10 o'clock onwards.
Yeah, wearing a button-down cardigan, no tie. Today, as you said, his appearance is very different to what we saw the last time he appeared in court. Just remind us, if you would please, Martin, what actually happens today? Does he appear in the dock at 10 o'clock?
Yes, he'll appear in the dock. There'll be, we think, probably an outline of those charges. Remember, he's pleaded guilty, so it's not a trial. There won't be lots of evidence and cross-examination. We might not hear anything from Hugh Edwards himself. I think it's likely that he'll let his lawyer do the talking. There'll be an outline of the charges or the crimes that he's committed. And remember, Kay, that the case against him is that he was sent 41 indecent images of children by the man I mentioned earlier, Alex Williams, who's already been sentenced away from this court. Those 41 images, and they can be still images or video images, all boil down to him admitting 3 charges of making indecent images of children. And the law is quite confused about what making means, but essentially if I sent you images like that and you opened them on your phone, you could be charged with that kind of offence. So it's really just accepting those images and opening them on your phone. He was sent those messages via the WhatsApp messaging system. So that's what he's pleaded guilty to. You can go to prison for that, but there are alternatives. I think the most likely alternative that he might get is a community order, which could include a number of things, but perhaps some voluntary unpaid work within the community, anything, something that benefits the community. He could be told to meet regularly with a probation officer. He could be subjected to a curfew or even be limited in where he can live. He might have to give a permanent address that he might have to stay at for the next 3 years. If he is given a community order, there's likely to be a 3-year limit on it. That would probably go alongside a sexual offender treatment programme, so he would have to submit to that could last many months, perhaps even longer. But that kind of sentence would be imposed if the district judge believes there is a good chance of Hugh Edwards being rehabilitated.
Okay. Martin, for now, thanks very much indeed. As we look at those pictures of him arriving one last time, basically the father of the BBC entrusted with the announcement of the Queen's death and the King's coronation, walking into court tireless today to accept his fate, having downloaded images, sexual images of children as young as 7. So Keir Starmer has said he's interested in an Italian scheme to process asylum seekers in Albania and wants to find out more when he meets with the Italian Prime Minister in Rome this morning. The Home Secretary has told this programme the scheme is not on the table at the moment, but the government will consider anything that works. We heard from her and the Conservatives in the last hour or so.
So we'll see what the Italy-Albania arrangement, how that develops. But our priority actually at the moment, what we're looking at is the development on organised immigration crime, the smuggler and the trafficking gangs. So the work we want to do with Italy specifically is around setting up new Europol task forces, upgrading Europol works. Sorry.
I'm asking you about Albania. Are you considering Albania or not?
It's not in place at the moment, so no. As we've always said, we will look at anything that works. But no, that's not the scheme that we're looking at the moment. What we're looking at the moment is developing new Europol task forces.
Everybody tells you we need a deterrent in place. We have to have a reason that stops people getting in those boats. And what the last government did was change the law so that if you arrived here illegally, you would be detained and you would be removed.
May I ask you this, please? How many people were sent by the British government to Rwanda?
The flights were booked, the resources were in place.
That's the reason. How many went?
That's the reason they were about to start arriving. The scheme was in place. And
it cost us 700 million quid and not one person was sent.
It was money wasted because the Labour Party had ditched the scheme. This is a man, Keir Starmer, has voted...
The High Court said it was illegal.
We've gone through the process. It was legal. We put everything in place to do that. We'd do you know what? We had lefty lawyers fighting us all the way.
Alice and Darren are with us. Darren's in Rome with the Prime Minister. What did you make of that, Darren? Morning.
Yeah, very good morning, Kay. From Rome, as you say, the Prime Minister is just about to meet the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, in the next hour or so. It's really interesting. You know, these are two very different politicians, by the way. I mean, Giorgia Meloni is very distinctly on the right of Italian politics, but Italy has seen a big fall in migration across the Mediterranean Sea in the last year or so, down some 60%. And so Keir Starmer, knowing the political challenge he faces at home around the English Channel, is trying to learn ideas, learn some lessons effectively from the Italians and all of this. And that includes potentially this Albania scheme that's quite controversial here in Italy. It has got some similarities with Rwanda, but it's not quite the same in the sense that if you do manage to claim asylum under the system, you will end up in Italy under that scheme, unlike the one that the Conservatives were imposing. But it is also clear that there is still some discomfort about all of this. Yvette Cooper was quite evasive with you, Kay, when she was answering those questions a little bit earlier, and the Conservatives clearly are attacking the government. But I think for Keir Starmer, what he's trying to do is get this message across, if you like, that if you want to solve the migration issue, you cannot do it alone, that you need the cooperation of France, Germany, Italy and others. And I suspect that is the message we're going to hear repeated time and again today, a little later, when the Prime Minister hosts a press conference this afternoon. OK, meantime, let's bring in Alice as well, should we, for the human side of this story. 8 more people drowning in the Channel over the weekend.
Yeah, it was a really busy weekend for people trying to cross from northern France to the UK. Where I am at the moment is the Dover Strait. It is the most narrow point between the two countries, and it's where many migrants over the weekend tried to make their way over. Now, 801 people successfully managed to make their way from northern France to the UK. But there was also a tragedy where one boat that contained 59 people got into difficulties just further down the coast from where I am. And 8 men sadly died, and their bodies were found on the beach. 6 people were taken to hospital, including a 10-month-old baby with hypothermia. Now, the weather has started to change. There were very good conditions over the weekend. The wind is now picking up, and the authorities here will be hoping that will deter some migrants from making this incredibly dangerous journey. Since I've been here this morning, we're seeing the authorities, the French police, the gendarmerie, they're policing the area, and at the moment, rescue vessels are in the water waiting to see if any migrants will be trying to make their way over. They'll, of course, be hoping that the change in the weather or the wind picking up will deter them. But unfortunately, with smuggling of people being such a multi-million-pound industry, it may not stop the smugglers, even with the weather turning.
OK, for now, thank you both. Thank you. All today's top stories for you in more detail now. Look is here.
Thank you very much, Kay. Really appreciate that. We're going to start with the winter fuel payment. The government is changing the eligibility rules for the winter fuel payments. From today, millions of pensioners who had received extra help to stay warm during the cold weather will lose out. Let's take a look at those details then. People who live in England and Wales can now get a winter fuel payment if they were born before September 23rd, 1958. They'll receive the payment automatically if they're in receipt of benefits. But the government estimates around 780,000 pensioners don't apply for pension credit that they're entitled to, which means they'll also lose out on the winter fuel payment. Scotland has its own scheme, but similar rules apply there too. Typhoon Babinka has made landfall in Shanghai. The Chinese government had issued a red alert with warnings of gales and heavy rain. Flights and trains have, of course, been cancelled in anticipation of the typhoon. The US Coast Guard is set to begin a public hearing into the fate of the Titan submersible today. 5 people died after the vessel imploded underwater in June last year. The co-founder of the company, which owned the submersible, and its former engineering director are among those due to give evidence over the next 2 weeks. A court case into the future of Rupert Murdoch's media empire starts today. The case will decide who controls Murdoch's family trust after he's gone. Which of his children will have major voting rights in his companies? Murdoch wants to change the trust he set up in 1999, which grants each of the 4 equal voting power. And it was a huge night at the Emmy Awards for the cast and crew of Netflix hit Baby Reindeer. Richard Gadd, who created the show, starred in the show, of course, too. It won 2 awards, while his co-star, Jessica Gunning, was named Best Supporting Actress. Also on the night, comedy series The Bear also took home 4 wins, while historical drama Shogun became the first non-English language show to be named Best Drama.
Talk about Tito Jackson. He has died at the age of 70, the older brother, of course, of Michael Jackson. Let's get more with Debbie. Hi.
Yes, of course. We've been talking about this all morning. One of the most iconic names, of course, part of the Jacksons, part of the 3 different iterations of the Jacksons that we've seen over the years, being Jackson Brothers, Jackson 5, and the Jacksons, of course. But he did have his own solo career, which he launched. He was the final Jackson to actually launch his own solo career back in 2016. And after his album, he decided to go back with his brothers to go on tour again. It was only 5 days ago, actually, that he was over in Munich, and he visited one of the tributes to Michael Jackson over there. There are initial reports, of course, came in from Steve Manning, who was his former manager and a longtime friend, about his passing, and it was then confirmed by his family.
OK. You were talking about his sons, 3 sons.
Yeah, his 3 sons, who I'm sure were inspired by him and his musical abilities. They went on to form that.
The 3 T's?
Yeah, that pop band. Remember one of their hits?
In the 90s, I think, wasn't it?
Going to #1. So, obviously, a big and a very hard day for them, but the legacy of the Jackson will go on.
Lives on, absolutely. We've got any music from the Jacksons?
Oh, yes, please.
A long instrumental. Here we go. Should have been a DJ.
Kay Burley on the mic.
Here we go. Blame it on what?
Tito Jackson, who has died at the age of 70.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'm going to have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here.
They are coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community. Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake might all be finished, I don't know.
is what's left of it.
Dense, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes. Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, an emergency appeal to raise money for victims of domestic abuse, backed by an array of celebrities. And so let's speak to David Morrissey, should we, who is standing by for us right now. Dame Helen Mirren is involved as well, of course, Joanna Lumley. Hi, David. Tell us about the campaign.
Yeah, hi. So this is a campaign, a joint campaign for Refuge and The Independent. And it's the Brick by Brick campaign, which is building more refuge for women who are suffering from domestic abuse. I mean, there's places that Refuge have, but they have to turn away someone every 2 hours because sometimes people turn up with teenage sons, or they'll have more than 2 children, or they might have some pets, even things like that. So they can't go into the usual accommodation that Refuge provides. So the Brick by Brick campaign is building new accommodation that can accommodate those incidents, those things that people might have in an emergency. And you know, it's
Sorry, I was just going to ask you, David, to expand on what the understanding of domestic abuse is, because a lot of people, when they think about domestic abuse, they think about physical abuse, but it's so much more than that, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we do think of it as physical abuse, and sadly that is still going on and very prevalent. But there's more subtle versions of that as well, as coercive behavior. But also in the world of tech, you know, you could have your abuser having your smart meter, controlling your smart meter, turning it up during the summer so that your bills are going sky high, turning it off in winter so that you and your children are suffering. They have control of your bank accounts. They have control of, you know, your Ring doorbell or your things like that. They can keep an eye on you. So there's lots of new and sort of more modern day ways of abusing people. And sadly in that, people, you know, that can lead to terrible fear, terrible depression. The statistics are just unbelievable. I mean, every week, approximately 3 women die from suicide as a result of domestic abuse, this type of domestic abuse. And, you know, 1 woman is killed by an abusive partner or ex every 5 days in this country, in England and Wales. So it's really it's an emergency campaign, I would say. And the Independents and Refuge are trying to build these new places so people can find this refuge from a terrible situation, which is also, since COVID, has gone up 61%. Refuge is seeing an increase in about over 60% in domestic abuse cases since COVID.
So the goal's to raise £300,000. What will you do with it?
So there's a number of places to build for women around the country. But also with this campaign, it's difficult because with some campaigns, you can see the results of your money, where it goes. But obviously, there's a level of secrecy here that Refuge have to sort of deal with because nobody needs to know where these women are going. But I've worked with Refuge for a long time, and they're a wonderful organization. And people can get involved if they go to the Refuge Appeal page, or they can text BRICK to 70560, and they can donate £15 from there. I can't emphasize how important this campaign is, in the sense that, you know, people are, you know, turning up at Refuge all the time, trying to find some sort of peace and security from terrible, terrible situations that they're in around this country.
Yeah, so visiting the Refuge's Appeal page or texting BRICK to 70560 and donating £15. We'll make sure to put that on our Twitter feed as well. David, who's backing the campaign?
Well, it's the independents who are backing it. They're running it at the moment. So it's a joint campaign between Refuge and the Independent. And, you know, it's something that they've been campaigning for a long time. I mean, when you see things like you see the requirements for this new place that they're building, and there's one thing that really struck me, which was arson-proof letterbox. And when you think about needing to put that into an accommodation for where women and their children go, it is a shocking indictment of where we are and where these people have to, so where they're escaping to, that you have to put in an arson-proof letterbox into an accommodation. So both the Independent and Refuge are running this jointly.
OK. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Monday morning. The royal family wishes Prince Harry a happy 40th birthday. We'll hear how he celebrated in the US. How do you feel about paying for the Prime Minister's wife's posh frocks? We'll talk about that in a second after today's top stories.
Thank you so much, Kay. We're going to start with the winter fuel payment. No, we're not. We're going to start with Donald Trump in the US because he's thanked security services and well-wishers and says he's safe and well after an assassination attempt. A man has been arrested and an assault rifle recovered. That's according to the FBI. Former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards has arrived at court. This was just a short time ago and is due to be sentenced this morning. The shamed broadcaster has admitted 3 charges of making indecent photographs of children. And Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in Italy this morning for talks with the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. They're expected to discuss the country's migration deal with Albania, which Mr Starmer, we're hearing, has signalled interest in. And Tito Jackson has died at the age of 70. The music legend and rock and roll Hall of Famer was the older brother of Michael Jackson and a founding member of the Jackson 5.
What is going on, Liz, with the Prime Minister's wife's clothes?
That's a very good question. So, I mean, I think the first thing to say on this is there's no suggestion that they've been trying to cover up the fact that Lord Ali, who is a Labour peer, has gifted the Prime Minister's wife, Victoria Starmer.
Didn't declare it to start with.
They didn't declare it, but that is because they didn't realise that that fell within the rules. It's never actually been done before. We don't know if anyone's been gifted, any Prime Minister's wife has been gifted clothes before, but it's never been, they've never announced it publicly before, or I should say, reported it to the parliamentary authorities. They checked...
Why did they check?
Well, they did check a little late when they realised that it had to be properly reported. Remember, they've just got into government, so maybe they don't know all the rules. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Because they did come forward with this information eventually. They reported it. It then, of course, became a story because it was late, and I think just because of the amount, right? I mean, it's thousands of pounds on clothes. Keir Starmer's had clothes from paid for by Lord Ali as well. So I think it's, you know, it's more interesting than it is a breach of the rules. But you put that to the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, today. She was talking about immigration, but I think she felt a bit on the spot when she was asked about it this morning. Let's have a look at that.
David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, has said that it's OK for Lady Starmer to get her clothes in this way because she doesn't get her outfits funded by the taxpayer. Do you think the taxpayer should pay for Lady Starmer's clothes?
No, of course not. That's not the way that we do things in this country. I think this is a political donation, and I think I don't know the details of the donation, but donations are always declared in the proper way.
Yeah, so the Foreign Secretary misspoke when he said that.
Well, he would think he was talking about arrangements in the US. I don't think there's any difference.
No, he was suggesting that it should be considered for the UK taxpayer to potentially pay for her clothing, as is similarly done in the US.
Well, no, we're a very different country to the US, and I think probably that's, you know, that's something that we all recognise, huge differences between different countries and the arrangements that we have. Yes, I think it's probably a very good thing, I think, sometimes that our politics is very different from the US politics too.
So he misspoke on two counts, didn't he? He said that the US taxpayer paid for the First Lady's clothes, which they don't. True. And he also suggested that it should happen here. And she wouldn't throw him under the bus, but she wasn't having any of it.
No, it was a bit all over the place, wasn't it? A bit of a mess. It didn't seem like Yvette Cooper was properly prepared to answer that question. David Lammy seemed to be kind of freelancing over the weekend and saying, you know, the US First Lady gets her clothes paid for. As you say, not true. Maybe we should do it in this country. Maybe the taxpayer should be paying for the Prime Minister's wife's clothes. I'm not sure that is the line that Number 10 would have wanted out there. And you could see there Yvette Cooper very much rowing back from that and saying that's not something that we want to see. And the Conservatives have picked up on this. Very unsurprisingly, given that one of the big stories about this government is that they've taken hundreds of pounds away from lots of pensioners, many of whom aren't rich, and now a story emerges in the newspapers that, you know, the Foreign Secretary says maybe the Prime Minister's wife's clothes should be paid for by the taxpayer. The Conservatives really, you know, tried to make a point of that, and we did hear Matt Vickers do that earlier today on this programme.
Should the taxpayer be funding the Prime Minister's wife's frocks?
They certainly shouldn't. Do you know what's infuriating to people in the streets out there is the fact that we've seen this Labour Party take away winter fuel allowance from pensioners on £13,000 a year. And then we've got David Lammy sat there telling us that a millionaire Prime Minister who's on £160,000 a year, we should be having some sort of, you know, worry that his wife can't afford clothes. That is just wrong. And you know what's worse about these donor scandals? What's worse about the scandal of Keir Starmer giving jobs to people who've donated to party, giving them access to Number 10, you know, cash, glasses for passes is completely wrong, because it's not people donating because they want to change the world. It's people donating and getting something in return.
Yes, as I said, no question of impropriety over this issue, but I think it's fair to say the Labour Party is a bit all over the place. The Prime Minister hasn't actually been asked about this yet, but I think someone has asked him about it on his trip to Italy this morning, so we'll hear from him probably in the next hour or so.
Great frocks that she was wearing. Not sure about his glasses, I have to say.
Not sure if they were worth thousands of pounds.
No, exactly.
Take them back, maybe.
Exactly, thank you. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Ed Davey has called for a tax on the wealthiest instead of cutting support for struggling pensioners while at the party's conference in Brighton. Let's get more. Rob standing by for us. Any more stunts planned today, do you think, Rob? Morning.
Morning, Kay. A slightly more kind of lower energy stunt plan this morning. Ed Davey is going to be out building a style in the Sussex countryside. So I think trying to kind of cultivate that wholesome image that he was propagating throughout the campaign as well. At the moment on the conference floor, the Lib Dems are discussing that old favourite Lib Dem hobby horse of electoral reform. I wouldn't expect to hear too much about issues like that from senior Lib Dems on the media across this conference, though. They've been told pretty strictly, or MPs have been told to pretty strictly stick to topics that they believe resonate with voters, the NHS, cost of living, sewage as well, and told to find ways to basically try and localise those issues to their own constituencies to try and firm up some of the voters that maybe lent them their votes in the last general election. Talking to one Lib Dem MP yesterday, he said that in a couple of years' time he wanted to be able to put on his leaflets that everyone in his patch would know somebody that he had helped, and most of his money had gone on to spending it on caseworkers in his constituency. So that sort of traditional Lib Dem strategy, I think, of trying to become local champions. In terms of the longer-term aim, well, Ed Davey said today that he wants to be the party of opposition by 2029. He wants to target some of the more rural Conservative seats that they are within 10,000 votes of taking at the moment and move forward and actually overtake the Conservatives. Look, I think a lot of that will depend on what the Conservatives do in the next 5 years. If they spend 5 years tearing strips off each other and imploding once again, then that can only be good for the Lib Dems. I think one point of caution, though, is whether there's a mismatch between some of the Lib Dems' core beliefs, pro-EU, pro-immigration, and what are some of the political preferences in those quite conservative areas, and whether that causes flashpoints with the grassroots Lib Dem members. This morning in that debate, we had one former MP, Tom Brake, saying he didn't think that the party had been vocally or forcefully making the argument for the EU or for electoral reform enough. That's not the type of message that the top brass here will necessarily want going out to some of those Conservative constituencies in what they call the blue wall that they will be targeting in the next 5 years.
OK, for now, thank you. Man City facing 115 charges for allegedly breaching the Premier League's financial rules. Rob has more. Morning.
Yeah, this is the biggest and perhaps most consequential case in Premier League history, and it all relates to the team that's won the most titles over the last decade. What it relates to is the financial rules that are brought in about 15 years ago, intended to limit how much clubs can spend. So when Chelsea were bought by Roman Abramovich many years ago, they could spend exactly how much they wanted. But once Sheikh Mansour from Abu Dhabi bought Manchester City in 2008, they started to be restricted how much they could earn. And this is what the case relates to. Did Manchester City somehow try to inflate its income wrongly? Did it try to disguise the source of income linked to its Abu Dhabi ownership in the UAE? And they are accused over a 9-season period of allegedly failing to provide accurate information about the sponsorships, also about the managerial contracts. One allegation that they might have paid a manager more from a club in the UAE than Manchester City were paying as base salary. And also, did they try to obstruct the Premier League investigation once they started looking into claims that emerged from leaks in a German outlet in 2018? So it is a huge case. We don't know how long this case will exactly go on for. It could be a couple of months. It's being held in private. It's an independent Premier League commission. And ultimately, it could end with Manchester City being docked points, even expelled from the Premier League. Okay. Manchester City, though, do say they have an irrefutable body of evidence to contest the case.
Well, let's see. Or maybe not. Thanks very much, Rob. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you Monday morning here on Sky. Well wishes from the royals for Prince Harry as he celebrates his 40th birthday.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining. I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'm going to have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here. They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community. Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight. What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake might all be finished, I don't know.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Traveling is not just about the destination. It's also about how you get there. Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Rhiannon's here. Thawing of relations with the royals?
Oh, look, it's all over the front pages, isn't it? People saying that simply from a social media post, it's kind of the olive branch from the royal family to Prince Harry. I think they were going to be damned if they did and damned if they didn't when it came to any message for his 40th birthday. I think if they hadn't posted something, we'd be again today talking about the fact that there's no sign of reconciliation. So I'm not sure that I read too much into it. I spoke to both palaces, Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace, on Friday to try and get a sense of whether we could expect anything for Harry's birthday. Kensington Palace just gave me a blunt no, and Buckingham Palace seemed to leave it a bit more open, which of course is why we had that social media post on Sunday.
If we saw that photograph in its original form,
yeah,
there were two people in that photo,
there were,
weren't there?
Yeah. And look, some people would say, well, that's a bit of an unfortunate crop because Meghan was sitting to the right of him in that original picture.
To the left.
A lot of people...
To the left of him.
To the left. I'm going to leave the left and right. It's never my forte. Anyway, she was cropped out of it. Look, many would say, look, photographers do that anyway to kind of get nice portraits of individuals. So maybe that's what happened there, as opposed to the royal family themselves deciding to do a cheeky crop.
Yeah. Okay. What is the relationship between the brothers?
I'd say, incredibly strained.
Yeah.
Whenever you try and have any conversations with either side about any suggestion of conversations or kind of an easing of relationships, you're immediately kind of pushed to one side. They just don't want to talk about it. I think what's potentially more interesting is how the King is feeling about it and those inside Buckingham Palace. I think when the King was diagnosed with cancer, there was a hope that maybe that would help to soften relationships. The big thing, though, that I keep being told is a massive sticking point is Prince Harry's issue about security and when he comes back to the UK. This is a massive bugbear for him and continues to be kind of a fight that he's having with the Home Office, but also a fight that he's having, I think, behind the scenes with his family, saying, look, this is utterly unfair that I don't get proper protection when I come back to the UK. So I think that's a big sticking point. And I think for the royal family, look, you cannot forget the book and the documentaries and that Oprah interview. And I think the family fear that whatever they say to him, is it going to end up being repeated back to them? But look, 40 is a big milestone, isn't it? And I was thinking about it, and I think the next decade is going to be really pivotal for Harry. I think for all of us, it's really going to show whether that leap of faith was worth it, whether it's going to work out or not, and how his life outside the royal fold, whether it can really be successful or not. It also made me look back at his 30s. Look, the end of his 30s, it was full of turmoil. It was so tumultuous and all of the mudslinging between him and the royal family.
I'm not sure there was a lot of mudslinging by the royal family.
Well, I think, look, if you go on social media, it still divides people, doesn't it? There are still huge numbers of people who support Harry and Meghan and think they were treated unfairly, which I think is fascinating. That's that dynamic still, that here in the UK, yeah, their popularity has plummeted, but actually internationally, they're still seen as massive stars, and certainly amongst like younger people as well. They think, look, an outdated institution just treated them unfairly.
Seems like yesterday that you were doing that interview with him. Were you in New Zealand, Australia, where he said he was really
it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, he was looking forward to meeting
30.
somebody to be special in his life.
That was an amazing moment. I hadn't spent that much time around him. Ahead of that interview, he'd said, you can ask me whatever I want. I might not answer it, but you can ask me what you like. And he all of a sudden came out with, I'd love to have kids right now, but there's a process you have to go through, which made me chuckle at the time. And also, he wanted to find somebody to share that life with him. And then within the next 5 years, all of that played out. The dream came true. But also ahead of that interview, I said to him, have you ever thought about leaving the UK? Have you ever thought about moving abroad? And he said at the time, yes, I would love to, but I can't because of the support I have to give Queen Elizabeth. And of course, now we know what happened. He found somebody who said, look, hold my hand and we can jump together. And now I think over the next decade, we're going to see whether or not that risk pays off, really. And hopefully he settles.
And as the late Queen said, recollections may vary.
Indeed, that is a quote we will never forget.
I don't think so.
No.
Anyway, happy birthday to him.
Yeah, happy
40
birthday.
years old.
And he's got his weekend breakaway with his mates. You can't help but remember that Las Vegas trip. Don't think he'll be going to Vegas this time. Now he's a family man.
Or playing pool.
No, well, exactly. Naked billiards.
Yeah.
Not happening, I don't think.
No.
So,
good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring you more on the shamed BBC presenter Hugh Edwards. He's in court where he'll be sentenced this morning over charges relating to making indecent images of children. Martin is at Westminster Magistrates Courts for us. We saw him arrive a short time ago. No suit, no tie.
No, he looked rather dressed down from that appearance, his first appearance here in July, and he swept in with what we think was his legal team. He wasn't looking down, he kind of almost stared out those photographers who were nearest the court entrance, looking them in the eye. No sunglasses this time, although it is quite a sunny day, but it was midsummer last time. So he swept in, chatted briefly with the security guards at the entrance, put his bag in, and he was pulling a small suitcase, wasn't he? Whether that contained his toothbrush, just in case he faces a custodial sentence. It's still a possibility, but it's unlikely that he'll get sent to jail today. Maybe just case papers. we don't know whether we'll hear from him when he does step into the dock in the next few minutes. Certainly the judge at the last appearance said that he wanted to know more about Hugh Edwards' motivation, his risk of reoffending, what had driven him to commit these 3 charges he's admitted. The judge might decide that his sentencing powers aren't great enough. They're very limited in the magistrates' court, so he could send him up to the Crown Court for sentencing. But I think it's more likely that he will get dealt with today. We'll get a brief outline of the charges he's admitted. We'll get his own lawyer talking, some mitigation, trying to lessen the potential sentence. And it may well be that Hugh Edwards is asked if he wants to address the judge. I mean, we've heard nothing from him in statements or in spoken words anywhere in the last year to give some kind of explanation for what lay behind this. But we will know, I think, probably before lunch what his sentence will be. I think the chances are that we will see him walking out of here a free man.
OK, Martin, for now, thank you. What a catastrophic thing.
Yes, and look, that's happening right now, as we know, at Westminster Magistrates Court. But in the meantime, many questions for the BBC to be answering. You know, namely, why wasn't he sacked? Earlier, people asking why was he still paid his salary from November onwards, the moment he was arrested. Now, it should be said, the BBC are now saying that they have asked him to pay £200,000 back, but whether he will is another question.
Absolutely. That's the money from when he was arrested to when he pleaded guilty. Of course, we're monitoring that for you. We're back tomorrow from 7. Look forward to seeing you then. Have a fantastic day.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid. And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.